Chapter 8882, Dad Beats His Son. Go, Ethan. Those 3 words still rang in Ethan's ears as he plummeted from the sky. He didn't pause to think. The moment his feet touched the ground, he thrust his blackened cane through Urizen's heart. Dante had felt the disturbance the instant Ethan fell, but by then it was already too late. The cane drove ever deeper into Urizen's chest, and with each inch it sank, a torrent of dark blue energy exploded outward, like a hidden ocean current unleashed. In an instant, the entire battlefield was swept up in its wake. This was no ordinary magic. It drew upon Urizen's own evil and madness, even as it called upon Ethan's humanity. The 2 natures within Ethan, his human soul and the demonic force he harbored, flared into violent conflict, each struggling for dominance. Under their combined pressure, space itself fractured. Shards of reality, crystal clear and glass-like, floated down around them. They weren't shattered fragments in the usual sense. Each piece held its integrity, drifting silently into the void without colliding. It was a scene of terrible beauty, a dance of light and darkness, order and chaos, all playing out in midair. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the next chapter of this epic struggle began. The pattern before them was unlike anything in existence, an impossibly intricate design that seemed to whisper the very philosophy of being and unbeing. When the swirling energies finally stilled, a new figure emerged, turning slowly until his back faced them all. It was Virgil, but not the Virgil they had known. At this moment, his human and demonic natures had fused into perfect harmony, forging an entity that transcended both realms. A strange light flickered in his eyes, gentle yet cold, a testament to his release from old burdens and his ironclad will for the trials ahead. Because Yuri had already consumed the fruit of the Qliphoth before their union, its ancient magic coursed through Virgil, amplifying his strength beyond imagination. In that instant, he achieved his ultimate form, the true demon. "Long time no see, Dante," Virgil murmured, his voice carrying equal parts nostalgia and challenge. With deliberate calm, he spun around, his gaze locked onto Dante's, an electric collision of shared history, unspoken regrets, and the unyielding promise of the battle to come. Dante met that stare, his heart a storm of conflicting emotions as he prepared for their long-overdue confrontation. The resentment between brothers stretches back too many years to count. "Long time no see, Virgil," Ethan said, forcing himself to stand tall. His breath came a little ragged. His recent fight with the enhanced Urizen had cost him dearly, both in strength and in magic, but he refused to show weakness. Virgil merely studied him with that familiar, inscrutable smirk. Ethan squared his shoulders. "Hand over the Yama demon sword." The words rang with iron resolve. The Yama demon sword, a relic said to slash through space itself, a bridge between the human realm and the world of demons, had always been the focus of their rivalry. Now, with Virgil's latest schemes threatening to ignite something far worse, Ethan could not let this pass. Virgil's lips curved in a mocking half-smile. "If you want it, come and get it." No sooner had he spoken than the 2 brothers sprang at each other, their blades slicing through the air in a flash of lightning. Each knew the other's style. Each had honed their skill against the other for as long as they could remember, and now it would decide once more which of them was stronger. Ethan's flame-forged sword blazed bright in his hand as he swung at Virgil's ebony-bladed Yama. Sparks flew in a deafening eruption the moment steel met steel, but the toll of Ethan's earlier struggles left him visibly weakened. Seizing the advantage, Virgil skillfully parried the attack, then thrust Ethan's own scabbard like a spear straight into his chest. The strike was swift and merciless. Ethan barely saw it coming. "Ugh!" A stifled gasp escaped Ethan's lips as the impact sent him skidding backward. Blood welled at the corner of his mouth, yet with iron resolve he planted his feet and wouldn't yield. Gripping the shaft of the scabbard protruding from his chest, Ethan wrenched it free, stumbled backward, and flung it toward Virgil, desperate for a counterstrike. Virgil's eyes gleamed. With uncanny precision, he caught the flying scabbard on the flat of the Yama blade. Still, the force behind Ethan's throw drove him off balance, forcing him to retreat as the ground beneath him cracked under the pressure. Silence hung heavy for a heartbeat, 2 warriors locked in a battle of wills, neither yet ready to relent. The air between them crackled with tension, every sound, ragged breaths, a distant whisper of wind, amplified in the hush. Nero's brow furrowed as he looked from Dante to Virgil. "Dante, what's happening?" Dante drew a slow, steadying breath, his expression hardening with resolve. He turned back to Nero, eyes filled with both seriousness and concern. "Step back, Nero. This fight is between Virgil and me." His words carried the weight of protection for his descendant. But Nero was no one's bystander. Clenching the hilt of the enchanted sword, Apophis, he refused to yield. "I don't care who you think should fight. This is my chance." With a fierce battle cry, Nero lunged at Virgil. Virgil's pale eyes widened for the briefest moment. He did not know Nero by sight, yet Urizen's memories had prepared him for the young hunter's reputation. In a single, graceful motion, Virgil's Yama sword and scabbard fused into one seamless blade. He met Nero's strike and halted it effortlessly, sparks dancing along the edge. "A fine weapon," Virgil said, his tone cool and measured. Though succinct, his praise spoke volumes. He not only acknowledged Ethan's power, but also quietly looked down on his inexperience. In his mind, Ethan had potential, but it would take time before he could ever be a true match. That very disdain, however, fanned the flames of Ethan's fighting spirit. "Is that so?" Ethan shot back, eyes gleaming. With a swift motion, he yanked the blue rose pistol from his back. Bang! Bang! 2 rounds sliced through the air, aimed squarely at Virgil. Virgil didn't even flinch. He raised the scabbard of the Yamato and gave it a gentle wave. The bullets hissed against an unseen barrier and ricocheted harmlessly away. Instead of discouraging him, that effortless defense only fired Ethan up more. He knew taking down someone like Virgil would demand more than one trick. Instantly, he shifted tactics, one moment charging forward with blistering sword slashes, the next leaning back to pepper Virgil with pistol fire. He probed every angle, searching for the slightest opening. With each exchange, Ethan's movements grew smoother, more precise. Every blow and every shot bore the weight of his determination and the spark of his courage, as if he were racing against time itself, desperate to seize any fleeting advantage. Dante watched the clash in tense silence, waiting for the perfect moment to step in. That moment came in the blink of an eye. Virgil had no reason to show mercy. In an instant, he unleashed the Yama blade, its edge wreathed in black energy, and drove it straight for Nero's chest. The attack was the dreaded Dimension Slash, a technique so powerful it could tear through space itself. Even Dante had to summon every ounce of his strength to withstand it. Chapter 883, The Tile Thrower. Ethan's reflexes kicked in before he even fully registered Virgil's attack. Clutching the magic sword Apophis across his chest, he braced himself against the lethal blow. Still, when Virgil's spatial slash struck, the force of the cut rent the air itself, blasting him backward several paces. Ethan's face drained of color as he realized just how vast the gulf in power between him and Virgil truly was. At that moment, Dante saw his opening. In the blink of an eye, he materialized between the two brothers, thrusting his blade, also named Dante, to block the next strike. Sparks flew as steel met steel. "That's enough, Virgil. He still has a long way to go," Dante said, voice firm beneath his ragged breathing. Virgil paused, chest heaving, his dark eyes flicking to Dante's exhausted form. Clearly he had no desire to press on, and besides, his own strength was flagging. With a swift motion, he drew the Yama demon sword, slicing through the rift that he himself had torn open moments before. The crack in space widened into a swirling portal, and without another word, Virgil strode into it. Just as Dante sprang forward to pursue, the rift snapped shut. "What just happened?" Dante muttered, turning to Ethan. "Where did he go?" Ethan shook his head, still recovering his breath. He scanned the ruins of the warehouse roof, now scattered with broken tiles and scorched beams, but Virgil was nowhere in sight. And Urizen? He should have been here to help, yet there was no sign of him either. Caught between relief and concern, Ethan tightened his grip on Apophis. For now, the battle had been paused, but the war was far from over. Ethan staggered forward, every breath a ragged gasp as though he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Then Virgil materialized out of the darkness, an electric bolt tearing through the still night, and his return struck Ethan like thunder. Nero, standing beside him, went still, eyes darting between the two brothers as Virgil vanished into a widening rift in space. Confusion and dread coiled in Nero's chest. He still chose this path, Ethan whispered, his voice a mix of frustration and relief. He turned to Nero, his expression haunted. With deliberate calm, he began to share the long, tangled tale of his relationship with Virgil, a story of brotherly bonds, immeasurable power, and hard-won sacrifices. He disappeared chasing greater strength, Ethan said, voice low. Now he's back, stronger than ever, driven by the same relentless obsession. He trailed off, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, as though searching for words that lay just beyond reach. Dante paced the length of the chamber, wrenching his jacket closed. Virgil's power had grown too great. Dante knew he couldn't face him alone. If this goes on, Dante, you'll never stand a chance against him by yourself, Nero said, voice low but firm. Dante stopped and met Nero's gaze. He'd feared as much. The mess Virgil had caused was spiraling out of control. Nero pressed on. I'll find Ethan. If he joins us, we'll have the strength to confront Virgil, and maybe we won't have to kill him. Dante frowned. Working with Ethan hadn't been part of his plan. Yet Nero's logic was sound. Before all this, Nero himself was considered the third most powerful demon. Now Ethan, Dante's long-lost father, had resurfaced, and no one knew how strong he really was. He could tip the balance. Ethan? Dante echoed, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Think about it, Nero urged. He might be the only one who can help us end this without bloodshed. Dante folded his arms, wrestling with the thought. He'd returned to this world to protect his family, not destroy it. But Virgil's obstinacy left him little choice. For the first time in a long while, Dante admitted a flicker of doubt. He wasn't sure he could win this fight alone. Dante felt a shock run through him. Virgil's power was nearly on par with his own, perhaps even greater. Ethan had only reached true demon by merging with the 2,000 years' worth of demonic energy his father, the legendary swordsman Sparta, had amassed. How, then, was Virgil narrowing that colossal gap so effortlessly? Could the fabled Kabbalah fruit of the demon tree be so potent that it outstripped everything Sparta built in 2 millennia? Nero studied Dante's troubled face. He'd never actually fought alongside Ethan before, and Dante hesitated at the thought of plunging into another brotherly feud. Yet he would do anything to halt Virgil's relentless advance. Ethan's strength might even exceed mine, Dante admitted, voice heavy with both hope and dread. If we join forces, we might stop this without destroying Virgil. Nero's jaw set. Then we find Ethan, he said. We won't let Virgil tear us apart. A fierce resolve burned in his eyes as they prepared to move. Dante caught Nero's arm just as he was turning away. Nero, be careful. Ethan, he hesitated, his voice heavy with both concern and helplessness. Ethan may have his own agenda. Dante knew all too well that this disagreement ran far deeper than any skirmish they'd fought outside these walls. Nero gave a brisk nod. Don't worry, I'll convince him. Without another word, he strode off, but he wasn't about to march all the way back to Fudu on foot. Instead, he ducked into the old phone booth beside the ancient magic tree. By some miracle, it still worked. Heart-pounding, he dialed Creto's number. Creto, where is Ethan? Nero's voice was brisk. Creto sounded as puzzled as Nero felt. He's already left the Citadel. He said if you rang him, he'd be here right away. Nero exhaled in surprise and relief. He's on his way? Yeah. Creto's tone was faintly amused. He's always full of surprises. Almost before the words left his mouth, Nero spotted Ethan coming down the path. The young man's shoulders shook, and he stumbled to one knee in exhaustion. Nero dropped the receiver. Ethan! He rushed forward, pulling Ethan upright. Come on, you've pushed yourself too hard. Let's talk this through. Ethan pressed a hand to his chest, took a steadying breath, and straightened. In that moment, determination shone in his eyes. It was time to take the final step. Ethan stood alone on the ridge, his cloak whipping in the midnight wind. Below him lay the ruined temple where he'd just driven back Virgil, and, just as he'd planned, left him wounded enough to stall his obsession with Pova. In this altered timeline, Virgil's humanity was shadowed and thin, barely redeeming him from the darkness he'd once embraced. Exactly the sort of broken ambition Ethan needed to keep Pova safe. A familiar voice cut through the night air. Hey, Ethan, long time no see. Ethan turned. Dante strolled up, his trademark grin in place and a man-sized sword shimmering by his side. Dante, Ethan replied, inclining his head. It's been a while. I see you've got your devil's sword ready. Dante gave the blade a casual twirl. And you've summoned yours too, That glowing edge, did you finally forge it into a true demon weapon? Ethan's eyes darkened. You could say that. Many years ago, I accepted my heritage fully. In one fluid motion, he drew forth a sword of deep violet light, the demon sword Apophis. It hummed with hungry power. Dante's brow lifted. Apophis? He glanced at the blade's runes. Back in Fortuna, you and Nero talked about the legendary swordsman Apophis. You both condensed your own magic swords in his name. I always suspected those weapons were more than mere echoes of demonic power. So this really is his sword? Ethan flexed his grip. I built it around what's left of Apophis's spirit. It's strong enough to sever limbs, but more importantly, it's bound to my own soul. It will obey only me. Dante nodded, respect and excitement sparking in his eyes. Well, that's one hell of an upgrade. With that at your side, Virgil's going to have a hard time forgetting about Pova. Ethan allowed himself the slightest of smiles. Good. As long as he remains fixated, he won't stray from the path I've carved for him. Now, Dante, what brings you here tonight? Another demon stirred up trouble? Auntie glanced toward the valley beyond, where flickers of crimson light hinted at fresh chaos. You know me too well. Shall we dive in together? Ethan hefted Apophis. Let's finish this. Then we'll see if Virgil still has any scraps of humanity left worth saving. With that, the two demon hunters leapt into the fray, blades blazing under a storm-dark sky. Chapter 884, Brothers Battle. Dante watched Ethan with quiet curiosity. It was clear that Ethan had no interest in drawing on the demonic power of the magic sword Apophis, so Dante held his tongue. At last, Ethan spoke up. When I was in the demon realm, I kept hunting down demons and absorbing their energies. That's what triggered my awakening. Dante nodded slowly, still trying to process that revelation. If merely devouring demons could spark an awakening, why hadn't his brother undergone the same transformation? Was there some special rule or treatment that applied only to Ethan? Nero cut in decisively. All right then, with Ethan's strength on our side, we'll capture Virgil for sure. Dante allowed himself a small smile. Virgil was formidable, but he didn't significantly outclass Dante, and with Ethan, whose true demon form had manifested long ago, their odds were overwhelming. Thankfully, Ethan wasn't one of those beings you had to drain to stay powerful. They wouldn't risk exhausting him. The three of them pressed deeper into the labyrinthine roots of the demonic tree reverse Kabbalah. At last, they emerged into a shadowy glade and found Virgil seated against the bark of the ancient tree, his posture relaxed but alert. Before anyone could make a move, a low drumbeat rolled across the clearing, its meaning as obscure and threatening as the depths they had just traversed. Hey, Virgil! Dante's voice rang out across the clearing, equal parts challenge and provocation, daring to confront their shared history and see if the brother before him was still the one he remembered. His strides were deliberate and unyielding, each step a declaration of his will to triumph and let go of the past. No more portals at every turn. Your days of ripping open dimensions are over. He halted a few paces from Virgil, who sat with his back to him beneath the ancient tree, statuesque and silent. Shadows swallowed Virgil's form, but when he slowly turned his head, the faint light caught in his ice-blue eyes, revealing a tumult of emotions. The weight of old memories, the resignation to their present, and an unbroken resolve for the future. Hand over the Yama sword, Dante said, his voice calm, yet edged with iron. Virgil remained motionless for a heartbeat, then spoke, each word measured and unwavering. If you want it, you'll have to take it yourself. In that single sentence lay the history of their countless battles and fragile reconciliations, a claim of ownership, a refusal to yield, and the unspoken truth of the bond that both bound and divided them. Memories rushed back, carrying Virgil and Ethan straight into those carefree days of their youth. Back then, they didn't yet understand responsibility or sacrifice. All they knew was the fierce joy of squabbling over a wooden sword, a favored toy, or even a bit of praise from their father. Virgil's treasured collection of Virgil's poetry, his most prized possession, was another frequent source of contention. Despite their constant bickering, the bond between them was genuine and warm, born of innocent brotherhood. But as they grew older, fate's wheels began to turn, steering them onto separate paths. In his relentless pursuit of power, Virgil made a dark pact with demons, setting himself on a road paved with blood and sacrifice. Ethan, by contrast, chose to stand for justice and protection, becoming a bridge between humanity and the demon world. Those choices drove a wedge between the brothers until they stood apart as each other's greatest adversaries. "You already know these rules," Virgil said, his voice tinged with both nostalgia and grim resolve. No matter the depth of their past grievances, today their story would reach its final chapter. Ethan nodded, and the dark blade in his hand seemed to come alive, answering his will as it flared with renewed brilliance. He understood that this fight wasn't just over the Yan demon sword. It was a reckoning of their past, present, and future. As they closed the distance, the air itself felt as though it had frozen. Even the on-sea howling wind fell silent, stripped of its arrogance. This would be a war without gunpowder, yet more relentless and savage than any they'd known, because each stood not only against the other's strength and skill, but against the fear and turmoil within his own heart. "It's time for closure, Virgil." Ethan's voice rang out like thunder in the stillness. He squared his shoulders, raising the dark magic blade in a poised, unwavering grip. Determination and a hint of regret shone in his eyes. He knew that once they fought, some wounds could never fully heal. Virgil's easy smile vanished. He slid a thumb along the pommel of his sword, and the Yama sword ignited in his grasp, its radiance dazzling in the muted light. He met Ethan's gaze, a swirl of emotions flashing in his eyes, and prepared to settle their score once and for all. Ethan's voice rang out over the howling wind. "I won't lose to you, brother." With that challenge, the two warriors lunged at each other, their fierce roars shaking the sky. Torn clouds circled them like restless spirits, whipped into motion by the force of their clash. Darkness pressed in on every side, yet around Ethan and Virgil a dazzling halo of light and power bloomed, as if nature itself had yielded to their centuries-old rivalry. Years of bitter separation and unspoken grievances surged between them like hidden currents in an abyss. Each time Ethan's crimson phantom blade carved an arc through the air, sparks thundered outward, raw, searing proof of his destructive might. Yet Virgil stood unmoved, his cobalt magic coalescing into an invisible shield that swallowed Ethan's fiercest strikes. Ethan darted forward again, every movement driven by determination and the promise he'd just made. The ground shattered beneath their feet, shockwaves rippled through the night. Virgil countered with a sweep of crystalline energy that cracked the earth in his wake. They fought not only with steel and sorcery, but with the weight of their history. Brothers on opposite paths, each convinced that only one could stand victorious. And still, they battled on, heaven and earth trembling in their wake. Ethan's every block and counterstrike spoke of his Spartan blood. The Yama blade in his hand was more than a weapon. It was an extension of his very soul. With each swing, a torrent of deep blue magic roared to life, slicing through space as if nothing could stand in its path. At his side lay Beowulf, not merely a magical artifact, but a testament to Ethan's past triumphs and a steadfast ally when facing overwhelming odds. As the cage-like bindings of light wrapped around his arms and legs, his strength and speed soared beyond anything he'd ever known. His fists and kicks struck with the force to shake mountains, and even Dante's fiercest blows were dismantled one by one, met with a calm confidence that seemed almost divine. Dante, undeterred, melted into a flicker of shadow and vaulted away in a series of graceful backflips, narrowly avoiding what would have been Ethan's finishing blow. In that instant, Dante's own magic flared to life, coalescing into the snarling form of the heavy cavalry motorcycle. More than a ride, it was the very emblem of his power on the battlefield. Chapter 885, The Battle of the True Demons. Dante's infernal locomotive thundered across the battlefield, its engine belching flames like the maw of a hungry titan. With unstoppable momentum, he hurtled toward Virgil, a blazing comet intent on destruction. Virgil, calm and composed, met Dante's assault without a flicker of fear. A cold smile curved his lips as he crossed his two blades, the Yama sword in one hand, the phantom sword in the other, and crouched low, coiled like a hunting cheetah. With a single, powerful step, the earth beneath them shattered. Virgil blurred into a streak of deep blue light, meeting Dante's scarlet charge in midair. Wherever their blades clashed, reality itself seemed to warp. The sky darkened, the ground trembled, and shockwaves ripped through the air like a furious storm. Their collision thundered through the wasteland, scattering dust and debris as though caught in a tidal wave of raw energy. Each strike rang like rolling thunder, each parry sent ripples across the battlefield. There, amid the swirling chaos, stood two fated rivals, Dante and Virgil, locked in yet another decisive showdown. Countless battles had brought them to this moment, and neither would yield until one true demon lay vanquished beneath the other's blade. The air crackled with anticipation as Dante narrowed his eyes, blade raised. Virgil steadied his stance, resolve burning in his gaze. The final clash was imminent, the duel of two brothers, bearing the weight of destiny itself. Their eyes met, conveying both a profound connection and an unbreakable resolve to fight. Rippling waves of illusion shimmered around Virgil until his form solidified once more. With a single, effortless motion, he dismissed the phantom swords that had danced at his side, replacing them with the legendary Yama sword held firmly in his hand. Even before it was unsheathed, the blade emanated a bone-chilling chill. Virgil's gaze remained calm and penetrating, as if he could peer into every hidden corner of the world. He made no immediate strike. Instead, in a deliberate, almost artistic ritual, he began to draw the raw currents of magic into himself, preparing for the clash to come. This was no longer merely a duel of steel and muscle. It had evolved into a contest of wills and arcane power. Taking a slow, steady breath, Virgil synchronized his heartbeat and breath with the surging flow of magic around him, as though the very air and earth were lending him strength. Dante, by contrast, chose a more visceral approach. He lunged forward and drove his own enchanted blade deep into Virgil's chest, unleashing a surge of dark energy in a single, brutal gesture. This looked like an act of self-mutilation, but in truth, it was Ethan's secret method of igniting his true potential. As scarlet magic erupted from his wounds, his body convulsed with raw power, and then changed. Two pairs of enormous, dragon-like wings burst forth from his back. They lifted him into the air and became the wellspring of his strength. No longer merely human or demon, Ethan had achieved a perfect fusion of both, his ultimate demon form. A feral light danced in his eyes, equal parts madness and clarity, as the boiling scarlet energy writhed around him like a hellspawn ready to devour anything in its path. In his hand, he gripped the magic sword that had split under the surge of power. Each swing now unleashed a thunderous roar, warping the very air and sending ripples through the battlefield. Across from him, Virgil, proud son of Sparta, answered with his own deep blue magic, the culmination of his unrelenting thirst for power and tenacious will to fight. Shadows of midnight scales crept over Virgil's skin, armor more unyielding than steel and brimming with arcane energy. Fathering a storm of cobalt light, he braced himself for Ethan's onslaught, knowing that only by matching demon fire with Spartan resolve could he hope to stand his ground. Ethan's eyes flared to a deep, penetrating blue, as if he could peer straight through a person's heart and shatter every illusion. Behind him, vast dragon wings unfurled slowly, each scale shimmering with a sapphire glow like stars scattered across a midnight sky. In this true demon form, Ethan had achieved the perfect fusion of human insight and demonic power, guided by humanity's wisdom, supported by the raw force of his demon nature. The phantom swords whirled back into being around him, their magical blades acting like loyal guardians, ready to intercept any attack from every direction. In his hands, two long swords wreathed in blue fire took shape, their enchanted edges so keen they could slice through space itself and cleave through any obstacle. "This," Ethan announced, voice ringing with fierce pride, "is the power of the genuine devil." "Still refusing to back down, I see," Dante replied with a sigh, bracing himself for the clash. With that, the battle reignited at a level neither combatant had yet reached. Dante's scarlet magic sword met Ethan's twin blue flame blades in midair, and where steel met steel, thunderous booms and blinding flashes exploded outward. Each strike rippled through the sky, forging a deadly lattice of fire and shadow as the two true demons fought with unparalleled fury. They moved so fast that all you could see were streaks of afterimages tearing through the air. Their power shook the ground beneath them, and everything around quivered in the wake of their strikes. "Virgil," Dante roared, his voice rattling the very earth. In an instant, he leapt skyward, enveloped in a swirling tide of molten silver magic, his Mercury style unleashed to its fullest. The air around him stiffened as if bound by invisible chains. Even time itself seemed to stall. In that frozen moment, Dante danced through the solidified space, each swing of his blade unleashing a flash of scarlet light. The once proud demons under his assault grew sluggish and awkward, as if time had forgotten to carry them along. Every blow Dante struck was precise and merciless, his blade reaping lives like a specter of death harvesting sinful souls. Yet amid that unstoppable onslaught, another figure materialized, a presence darker and colder than the rest. Virgil, the other legendary scion of the Spartan bloodline, descended into the fray, revealing the true demon that lay within. Virgil stood there, wreathed in deep blue magic that sharply contrasted with Dante's scarlet aura, like the brightest star against the night's deepest void. "Dante!" Virgil's voice thundered, each syllable ground out through clenched teeth and heavy with tangled emotion. Two true demons, two sons of Sparta, now faced one another with every grievance and grudge forged into lethal intent. In his hand gleamed Yamato, the legendary blade rumored to slice through space-time itself. At his command, silver magic pulsed along the sword's edge, coiling into slender, snake-like blades of light that fanned across the battlefield. Where Dante fought with raw, unbridled ferocity, Virgil's style was controlled and precise. He moved like an elegant dancer amid shafts of light and shadow, each measured stroke deflecting Dante's savage attacks while steadily wearing down his defenses. "Judgment!" Dante roared, abandoning all restraint. A torrent of crimson energy surged from every muscle into his magic sword as he prepared to unleash his full power. Ethan's scarlet sword energy raged across the battlefield like a roaring storm. Beneath its furious surge lay boundless wrath and an unbreakable will, as if determined to shred every obstacle that stood in its path. Chapter 886: Chop everything up, and the world will suffer. Dante threw back his head and howled at the sky. Invisible flames roared to life around him as rivers of scarlet demonic energy poured from his body, staining the air with a palpable sense of dread. His eyes flared a deep, bloody red, each pupil alight with drifting motes like trapped stars, an unholy fusion of majesty and madness. From the ground at his feet spilled legions of shadowy specters, an abyssal host that writhed and coalesced until it assumed a towering, nightmarish shape. This monstrous avatar was no mere illusion or arcane trick. It was the living embodiment of Dante's bloodlust, the external manifestation of his relentless hunger for battle and absolute power. Across the war-torn field, Virgil, once Dante's brother-in-arms, now his most implacable adversary, advanced in Black Knight's armor that seemed to drink in the feeble light around him. He wielded the fabled Yama blade, a sentient weapon said to slice through both matter and dimension with effortless cruelty. Each swing tore at reality itself, warping space in shimmering ripples and briefly freezing time where the blade's edge passed. In that charged silence, heaven and hell collided, Dante's infernal rage meeting Virgil's lethal precision. The very ground trembled under their wrath, and in that moment the world itself seemed destined to crack beneath the weight of their fury. Ethan realized that if he stood any hope of besting an adversary like Dante, he'd have to commit every ounce of his power. Focusing his magic into the blade of his dagger, he unleashed the dimensional slash, an attack that transcended ordinary limits. A silver arc cleaved the air, not merely cutting flesh and bone, but severing the very fabric of time and space. In an instant, the battlefield was engulfed by a colossal vortex. Moments stretched and folded in on themselves. Reality shimmered like a mirage. As Dante met Ethan's strike with a ferocious counterblast, their clashing energies ignited the sky in a blinding eruption of light. Brilliant scarlet and deep cobalt intertwined, painting a breathtaking tableau against the war-torn backdrop. Around them, the world unraveled, solid ground fractured into drifting shards, and the line between past, present, and future blurred beyond recognition. For a heartbeat, nothing felt real, only the raw force of two wills locked in a cosmic struggle. Then, as quickly as it began, the maelstrom receded. Dust and motes of light settled through the fissured air. Ethan steadied himself, dagger still humming with residual power, as Dante's form solidified on the opposite side of the rift. Both warriors stood wounded but unbowed, aware that this titanic exchange was only the opening move in a battle that would reshape reality itself. The shockwave from the explosion tore through the air like a rampaging storm, scattering distant clouds and rattling every bone in its path. Thunderous roars echoed across the battlefield, each one a reminder of the titanic struggle unfolding below. From their vantage point on the ridge, Nero and Ethan watched in tense silence, unable to tear their eyes away. Nero swallowed hard. Are we really just going to stand here and do nothing? What if Dante— He'll manage, Ethan cut in, his voice calm but resolute. Dante promised he'd handle this on his own. Nero's brow furrowed with worry. But what if something goes wrong? What if he— Ethan laid a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. Don't worry, Nero. If Dante runs into trouble he can't overcome, I won't hesitate. I'll unleash my true demon form, and trust me, my power will more than double theirs. I'll see to it personally that they're subdued. Below them, a silver streak cleaved the air, a slash of pure, searing light. It cut through the gloom like a brilliant meteor, its razor-thin trail humming with raw, heart-stopping energy. Both men held their breath, watching as the decisive moment of this century's greatest duel drew ever nearer. When Ethan's blade cut through the air, time itself seemed to freeze. All was silent except for the low, resolute hum of steel parting space, the sound of the demon world tree taking its final breath. This colossal, ancient behemoth not only bridged the realms of humanity and demonkind, but also channeled the very essence of demonic power. Yet beneath Ethan's seemingly gentle stroke lay a force of utter destruction. A slender crack appeared, then crept steadily along the tree's vast trunk, as precise and flawless as an artist's finest engraving, and just as merciless. With every fraction of an inch the fissure widened, a deep, agonized roar echoed from within its core, the ominous harbinger of the tree's collapse and the tremor that would shatter the foundations of the demon world. All around, branches shook and leaves quivered, as though the tree itself recoiled at the approaching end. Each fluttering leaf seemed to speak a tragic lament, reluctance, despair, and the helpless acceptance of an inevitable doom. The sky that should have belonged to the demon's grand carnival lay heavy and brooding. Blood-red clouds surged like an unstoppable tide, blotting out the stars and moon and casting the entire world into a malevolent shadow. Thunder rolled across the heavens like a divine verdict on the demon realm, each mighty crash followed by jagged lightning that revealed the fierce struggle far below. In that storm-lit stillness, the very air seemed to tremble, and every blade of grass bore witness to an elegy of ruin. At the heart of the devastation stood Virgil, his black robe billowing in the tempest. With a single, fluid motion, he sheathed his sword as though his earth-shattering strike had been nothing more than a sparring thrust. He gazed down at the shattered remnants of the demon world tree, pride and unease flickering in his steely eyes, pride at the sheer force of his power, unease at the thought that Dante might yet survive his blow. Across the ruin, Dante himself rose unscathed. Not only had Virgil's fierce strike failed to harm him, it seemed only to fuel his resolve. From his back unfurled a pair of scarlet wings, glowing like living embers and casting a fierce light over the blasted battlefield. As the thunder rolled on, Dante's blazing silhouette promised that this war was far from over. Ethan's greatsword glowed as arcane energy surged through its blade, transforming it into a spinning ring of steel. Each swing thundered with a deafening roar, the razor-edged wheel cutting straight toward Virgil. Their duel was more than just a test of skill. It was a clash of wills, and every impact unleashed blinding flashes that made the demon realm tremble. Beside him, Nero sprang into the air, twin pistols blazing. Ethan remembered how, in the original timeline, their fiercest strikes against the world tree hadn't even scarred its bark. Now, with no holding back, their combined onslaught shattered the ancient trunk in a single volley of magic and steel. Before Virgil could recover, Dante's roar split the chaos. Scarlet power condensed on his phantom sword like a raging storm, coalescing into a brilliant arc of light and hurtling toward Virgil. Unfazed, Virgil twisted his body with inhuman grace, the lethal stroke grazing past him as though he were water. In the same motion, he whipped the Yama sword around, and dark ripples of blade energy warped the surrounding space. The two forces collided in a cataclysm of shattered earth and crackling magic. an exchange more furious than anything the original plot had ever hinted at. The blade whipped upward at an impossible angle, its tip aimed straight for Dante's heart. In midair, two opposing magics, one crimson, the other sapphire, clashed in a violent explosion, like the raw forces of chaos and order tearing at each other from the dawn of creation. The shockwave rippled outward, the rushing air trembling through the surrounding space. And then, in the heart of that power struggle, Virgil vanished as if he'd been nothing more than a shadow. A dark blue afterimage lingered for an instant before he reappeared on higher ground. From his blade erupted countless silver-white shafts of light, scattering across the sky like a field of stars, each beam brimming with enough force to slice through anything that dared stand in its way. When Dante saw the silver-white blades coalesce into a seamless net in midair, he couldn't suppress a sneer. He knew Virgil's spatial magic was formidable, but not invincible. Drawing on his own precise control of power and years of hard-earned experience, Dante shifted his stance, both hands tightening on his sword as he braced himself. But Virgil's next assault was weirder and more unpredictable than Dante had dared imagine. Streams of swordlight wove together into an airtight mesh, each shining thread darting around Dante's guard with uncanny accuracy and gouging fresh scars across his flesh. Still, the pain only fueled Dante's fury. His resolve flared hotter than ever, and he met each incision with an even harder swing. The clash that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. Dante's magic blade and Virgil's Yama sword crashed together again, their opposing energies spiraling into a deafening roar. Shockwaves rippled outward like tidal waves, shredding the surrounding void into jagged fragments. Dante and Virgil staggered backward, rocked by the shockwave of that immense force. Yet while Dante's balance wavered, his eyes blazed all the more fiercely, and Virgil's resolve only hardened. In that instant, Virgil unleashed his signature technique, slashing through reality itself. Channeling the power of his demon blade Yamato, he tore open rifts in space, slipping in and out of the battle like a phantom. One moment he was to Dante's left, the next he surfaced at his right, sometimes even behind him, leaving Dante struggling to pinpoint his brother's true position. Dante forced himself to breathe evenly, summoning his demon sight to track every flicker, every shimmer where Virgil might reappear. He knew that to win this duel, he'd have to expose the slightest opening and strike without mercy. "Humph," Virgil's voice cut through the air, cool and unhurried. "You're strong, Dante, but far too reckless." No sooner had the words left his lips than Virgil materialized at Dante's flank. Yamato rose in a single fluid motion, its blade gleaming with enough force to shear through dimensions. Yet Dante only grinned, an expression edged with wild excitement. His hand flashed to his side holster, but no gun emerged. Madness danced in his gaze as he hurled his head back and bellowed a furious roar. Arcane energy coiled about his form, crackling like lightning. The air around him vibrated as the raw power of his demon blood began to boil. Dante's laughter echoed, a taunt and a challenge all at once. He was ready to answer Virgil's gambit with an attack that would reshape their entire battle. The scarlet phantom blade flared to life in an instant, blossoming into a massive, blood-red sword of light that collided head-on with Jill's own assault. Two opposing currents of magic met in midair with a deafening roar, as if reality itself were shifting hue. Shockwaves pulsed outward like tidal waves, warping the space around them and sending clouds of dust spiraling into the sky. Both Dante and Virgil were shoved back by the force, their boots slicing shallow trenches in the earth. Yet neither wavered. Their faces hardened, eyes alight with unbreakable resolve. Dante let out a triumphant cry. "Come on, Virgil, let's see who's stronger." Magic simmered beneath Dante's skin, boiling over at his command. The scarlet phantom blade fragmented into countless shards of crimson light, each shard humming with enough power to rend the very void. The shards cascaded like a torrential downpour, interlacing into an inescapable net meant to trap Virgil and shatter every defense. But Virgil was no easy prey. A cold smile curved at the corner of Virgil's lips as the Yama demon sword seemed to come alive in his hands. With every swing, the blade tore at reality itself. Dark blue cracks jaggedly spreading through the air, its abyssal glow stirring dread in anyone who dared look. "Dimensional rend, Z?" The soft syllables of his incantation carried an undeniable weight. In an instant, Virgil vanished, leaving behind only blurred after-images as the ruptures in space began to seal themselves. From those slits in reality, two shadowy figures leapt forth, demons bound to him by an unbreakable link. Together, they wove this lethal assault. One demon materialized on his left, the other on his right, mirror images of Virgil in posture and intent. Their swords radiated the same deep blue luminescence as the Yama demon's sword, and they closed in on Dante, forging a vast, hemispherical cage of swirling magic. Inside that dome, time seemed to slow and the air grew unbearably heavy. Dante's heart pounded as he realized the truth. He was trapped in a prison of cobalt-blue arcana. Around him, silver-white sword energy roiled like a rising tide. Each blow he struck only intensified the searing pain that stabbed through his limbs. There was no easy escape from this abyssal onslaught. Thigh, arm, chest, back. Each stroke of the blade grew colder, deadlier than the last. Dante can't possibly survive this. Nero cried out in panic. Ethan already knew Dante was doomed. In the official storyline, Dante had spent a month in a coma, drawing magic from the great tree to rebuild his strength. He didn't, and never could, benefit from that miracle. Meanwhile, Virgil had absorbed the transformed life energy of tens of thousands, his power now far beyond anything the original plot ever hinted at. Dante tumbled from the sky as Virgil pressed the attack, the Yon demon's sword slicing through a rift in space itself. Then, at the moment when all hope seemed lost, something extraordinary happened. A shaft of pure white light, like dawn's first ray, broke through the brewing storm of clouds and haze, washing the battlefield in a warm, clarifying glow. The oppressive chill and despair retreated before it, and with that light came the arrival of an even greater force. Standing at the eye of that brilliance was the true demon, Ethan. Cloaked in unrivaled majesty and power, he stepped forward to claim his place in this fateful showdown. Ethan's very presence seemed to defy the laws of the world. Towering over everything, his body was sheathed in pure white scales and keratinized plates that shimmered with a holy light, armor that spoke as much of his immense strength as it did of his untainted soul. From his skull jutted razor-sharp bone ridges and inverted horns, not only fearsome weapons but living proof that he had reached the apex of demonic evolution, breaking free of mortal limits to stand where gods and demons converge. But it was his four vast, ivory wings, reminiscent of a dragon's, that drew every eye. With each measured flap, they summoned gusts strong enough to sweep away dust and smoke, announcing his approach. These wings were more than mere tools for flight. They were the ultimate emblem of his identity and station. When he rose into the air, Ethan appeared as a deity come down to the mortal realm, radiating an aura of inviolable majesty and sacred power. Clutched in his hand, his magic sword pulsed and shifted, its blade aflame with new, transcendent energy, transformed to match the glory of its wielder. His blade shed its cold metal form, blossoming into pure, flawless white light, like a lightsaber capable of severing every trace of vanity and evil. As its luminous tip swept through the air, a holy aura purified the battlefield, leaving behind radiant scars that spoke volumes of Ethan's unshakable strength and resolve. "Leave the next battle to me." The conviction in his voice left no room for doubt. Standing squarely at the heart of the fray, Ethan's commanding presence made it clear. The fate of this fight now rested on him. Chapter 888, The Magic Sword That Absorbs Attacks. Virgil's lips curled into a sneer the moment he heard Ethan's challenge. Disdain flickered in his crimson eyes as he regarded the half-demon before him. In Virgil's mind, Ethan's impure blood marked him as nothing more than a mortal upstart, no match for a pure-born demon. "How dare a mere half-breed meddle in our affairs?" he spat. With that, Virgil's form blurred into a streak of blue light, vanishing into the rifts in space. He intended to strike swiftly and teach Ethan an unforgettable lesson. Yet as soon as their battle truly erupted, all of Virgil's expectations were rudely upended. High above the battlefield, the dark blue demon clashed with the radiantly white figure of Ethan. Each collision rang out like thunder, distorting the air around them. Virgil swung the Yama sword with ruthless precision, its blade crackling with raw power, but under Ethan's pure white light, even that formidable weapon seemed to wane, as if stifled by a greater force. What unsettled Virgil most was Ethan's strength. It far exceeded anything he had anticipated. As blows exchanged and space itself trembled, Virgil realized this would be a fight unlike any he'd ever fought. Ethan's lightsaber flared with blinding white light and struck Virgil in mid-air. With a thunderous crash, Virgil was sent hurtling into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. He lay sprawled, eyes wide with disbelief. He'd never imagined being defeated so effortlessly by what looked like an ordinary demon hybrid. Ethan touched down lightly in front of him, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. "We're cousins," he said, voice equal parts teasing and rueful. "By our ages, you should call me cousin." The fierce combat that had crackled between them shifted instantly into something more uneasy and intimate. Virgil's mocking grin froze, his contempt giving way to raw surprise. He'd always believed in his racial superiority, yet here he was, shaken by a mixed-blood demon daring to claim kinship. "Cousin?" Virgil repeated, his voice low and uncertain, as if testing a word that suddenly threatened everything he thought he knew. Virgil's gaze flicked between Ethan and Dante, hunting their expressions for answers. Dante, unusually composed, merely waited, calm as if he'd known all along and was simply biding his time. Ethan took a slow step forward, voice both gentle and resolute. "Yes, Virgil." The lightsaber in his hand had dimmed, but its latent power still thrummed in the air. Dante drew a quiet, rueful breath. "Virgil, you've been so wrapped up in your pride, your strength, and your heritage that you've overlooked the deeper mysteries of our own blood. Ethan is our cousin. His existence was kept hidden, so well that even I only learned about him very recently." Virgil's forehead creased as his mind raced back through every memory of his father, Sparta. The man's reticence, the unshed sorrow in his eyes, the secrets he guarded fiercely. He had never guessed those buried truths would tie directly to the fierce adversary he'd just faced. Ethan studied Virgil's face as the younger man spoke, his voice tinged with equal parts reluctance and curiosity. "So, where does his power come from?" Ethan straightened, meeting Virgil's gaze. "My father was the biological brother of Sparta, the legendary magic swordsman Apophis." Dante stepped forward to elaborate. "Ethan's gifts stem from a bloodline unlike any other. He carries both demon's fury and angel's holiness in his veins. That dual heritage lets him unleash devastating destruction one moment and purifying light the next. In fact, the brilliant white radiance you just witnessed was the awakening of his angelic blood." Dante's explanation wasn't new to him. It was simply the clearer, more dramatic way of repeating what Ethan had already told him. After all, a demon-angel hybrid sounded far more remarkable than a mere demon-human cross. As for the rumors Nero had spread, that Ethan had ventured into the demon realm to save his mother, only to find her dead, that tale seemed almost pedestrian now. Virgil's expression shifted as he absorbed this revelation. He bowed his head, wrestling with the enormity of it. Finally, he looked up, determination gleaming in his eyes. A half-demon, half-angel warrior. No wonder he's so powerful. Virgil's voice was cool and unflinching. "If I can spill the blood of my own brothers for Baowa's sake, what are cousins but another sacrifice? It seems I have one more name to cross off my list today." Dante's face fell. His brother's resolve had not softened. Next to him, Ethan already knew that no argument, no appeal to family, would change Virgil's mind now. Ethan hovered in midair, bathed in a radiant, almost holy light. 4 immaculate, dragon-like wings spread behind him, each scale gleaming like polished ivory. He looked every bit a celestial messenger, if not for the dark undertones swirling beneath his glow. In his right hand gleamed the demon sword Ethan, its pure white blade humming with quiet menace under the sun, quivering as though eager to devour any who approached. Across the void, Virgil completed his transformation. His skin deepened to an inky blue, and 4 ghostly wings unfurled like living shadows. With each beat, the air around him bent and rippled. In his palm he held the Yama blade, a fabled weapon said to slash through all matter and even tear open space itself. Silence fell, broken only by the soft hum of 2 otherworldly swords poised for the strike that would decide them all. A pale, glimmering aura bathed the clearing, the chill of its light intertwining with the glow of Ethan's blade to paint a stark tableau of shadow and radiance, of darkness clashing with light. From the edge of the mist, Virgil's voice rumbled low and commanding. Ethan, you claim to be a hybrid of angel and demon. Today, I'll see just how much power that cursed bloodline can grant you. In a heartbeat, Virgil blurred forward, the Yama blade slicing through the air in wide, jagged arcs that tore faint rifts of darkness across the clearing. Ethan's lips curved into a calm, almost mocking smile, so serene it sent a ripple of unease through anyone watching. With a single, graceful leap, he arced above Virgil's sweeping strike, the deadly edge missing him by inches. As he descended, Ethan's own blade, its core a brilliant, humming strand of pure light, responded with streaking speed. The tip of his blade tapped Virgil's with a soft, resonant clang. White energy hissed and slithered along the Yama blade like a living serpent, draining the darkness from Virgil's strike and weaving it into Ethan's own power. "Your attack will only strengthen me," Ethan declared, his voice echoing through the night with an unmistakable note of pride. Around him, his magic sword seemed to pulse and breathe, already converting Virgil's assault into a new tide of energy entirely under Ethan's control. As Ethan's words rang out, the Yama sword's icy glow was swallowed by a brilliant white radiance, as though the light itself were feasting on the gathering darkness, bit by bit. Chapter 889, Welcome to the Boss Team. Blinding arcs of swordlight sliced through the air, so brilliant they made it nearly impossible to look directly at them. It was a breathtaking spectacle. Good and evil, light and darkness intertwined in a single, dazzling display. As Ethan's command of the blade grew, his simple counterattacks blossomed into an irresistible torrent, one by one dissolving Virgil's assaults and driving him inexorably backward. Wherever Ethan's sword passed, the very atmosphere rent open, leaving jagged rifts in space itself. Virgil's composure wavered for the first time. He felt, deep in his bones, the terror of facing Ethan's enchanted blade. This was a trial unlike any before. Summoning every scrap of his resolve, he steadied his breathing and roared, "Dimension Slash!" Despite the flood of adrenaline in his veins, Virgil's face smoothed into an expression of calm determination. In a battle of this magnitude, even the slightest panic spelled ruin. The Yama sword in his hand seemed to come alive, each swing warping reality around it. Space itself twisted and folded at the weapon's edge, those seemingly erratic arcs hinting at the universe's deepest, most profound laws. No longer was Virgil's assault confined to the physical plane. He now struck at the very essence of space, searching for the one opening that could shatter Ethan's seemingly flawless defense. Ethan seemed born to master this power. As he danced through the sky, his lightsaber did far more than block attacks. It absorbed them, converting hostile magic into raw energy. When Virgil unleashed a barrage of arcane fire, barely visible vortices spiraled around Ethan's blade, drawing each spell into itself. Every strike Virgil hurled felt like it was landing on air, sapping his strength while leaving him empty-handed. But the energy Virgil poured in did not vanish. Instead, it merged with the lightsaber's own power, reinforcing the blade until it thrummed with newfound potency. With each passing moment, Ethan's counterattacks swelled like tidal waves, crashing relentlessly toward his foe. Their battle tore at the very fabric of space, light and shadow colliding in thunderous roars. Under that vast, storm-darkened sky, the clash of good and evil painted a spectacle of raw, unyielding force. The air around them crackled with raw energy, as if set ablaze by their collision of power. After a particularly savage exchange, Ethan at last discerned Virgil's fatal weakness. Drawing on the devouring ability of his lightsaber, he not only absorbed Virgil's physical blows, but also intercepted the very currents of his sorcery, turning the enemy's own magic back upon him. In that instant, Ethan became the most precise hunter in the cosmos, sensing the tiniest flaw in Virgil's spellcraft and exploiting it without mercy. With a roar, Ethan launched himself forward like a meteor streaking across the night sky. His lightsaber flared into a brilliant spiral of light and shadow, cleaving the air as it hurtled straight for Virgil's heart. The dark sorcerer reared back, summoning every shred of defense he could muster, but it was all for naught. Ethan's full-strength assault, an unholy fusion of light and darkness, of creation and destruction, broke through Virgil's guard in a single, shattering strike. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to freeze. The world trembled. Then Ethan's voice rang out, calm and unwavering. "It's over, Virgil." With that, he wrenched the Yama sword from Virgil's trembling grasp. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock, and then he plummeted from the sky, vanishing into the darkness below with a final, distant crash. Dante and Nero, poised at the ready to join the fray, scarcely believed their eyes. Ethan had driven Virgil back single-handedly, and with alarming ease. The gulf in power between them was staggering. Dante had insisted no mortal, however talented, could outmatch Virgil's demonic might. That was why he and Nero had prepared to combine their strengths and fell the legendary warrior together. Yet here they stood, his unexpected, triumph laid bare. Ethan's strength clearly eclipsed that of both brothers. Virgil's cold stare flicked from Dante to Nero, then settled on Ethan with a flash of wounded pride. How could he, Virgil, be unseated in some nameless wasteland? The question scorched his mind, the last gasp of his dignity. He could not accept a quiet erasure, but reality was merciless. He felt his power draining away like a retreating tide, irreversible, unstoppable. His vision blurred. His eyelids grew unbearably heavy, each blink a monumental effort. The sharp sting of pain, once his steadfast ally, faded into a distant murmur, replaced by a profound, almost welcoming emptiness. Am I dying? The thought echoed through Virgil's mind, tinged with fierce refusal and helpless despair, as the world around him slipped into shadow. Ethan stared into the deepening dusk, his heart pounding with both fear of the unknown and a bittersweet longing for the life he'd lost. Then, without warning, a brilliant shaft of light pierced the gloom, like the first sunrise after a long starless night, flooding Ethan's world with warmth. It was so blinding, he instinctively squeezed his eyes shut, yet even through his tight lids, that glow seeped in and settled around his heart, filling him with hope. A majestic voice, as vast as the sky itself, rolled through the silence, resonating in every corner of his soul. Do you want to live? The question was simple, but its force was undeniable, stirring Ethan's deepest will to survive. He didn't hesitate. Yes. And then the light vanished, plunging him back into darkness. He couldn't tell how much time had passed. Gradually, Ethan blinked his eyes open. Before him, the world no longer lay in raven blackness but was bathed in a gentle, luminous glow, an affirmation that he was still here, and that life, somehow, had been given a second chance. Ethan's eyes fluttered open to a soft, otherworldly glow. For a moment, he thought he was back on the battlefield, until he realized he was lying on a strange, warm platform that yielded gently beneath him, as if it sensed his presence. The walls around him were fashioned from the same mysterious material, emitting a tranquil, pale light that brightened the space without ever glaring. A smooth, amused voice broke the silence. Well, this newcomer is of excellent quality and remarkably quick to wake. The speaker stepped forward, a tall figure with sharp features and eyes that shone with restrained curiosity. Ethan struggled to push himself upright, every muscle protesting the effort. His mouth felt like sandpaper as he croaked. Where am I? The man offered him a faint smile. As you can see, this is the stronghold of the boss team, a nexus that transcends life and death, drawing in the greatest warriors and the most storied legends from every corner of existence. Ethan's heart thudded. Though his head pounded and his limbs felt heavy, he knew this place had altered something fundamental in his world, and in him. He forced himself to meet the stranger's gaze. And what exactly do you want with me? The man's smile didn't falter. To find out just how far your potential will take you. At the moment you died, you made a choice. You answered that voice, and in doing so you were granted the chance to be reborn and become one of us. Chapter 890. Everyone is a boss. When Ethan heard those words, 1,000 thoughts surged through him. He could still feel the echo of blinding light, the majesty of that voice, and his own desperate cry. Think! In that moment, a fierce will to survive had burned within him, yet it had felt almost too unreal to grasp. Now he stood in a dimly lit, high-tech chamber, surrounded by formidable figures, bosses plucked from countless worlds and dimensions, whose mere presence pressed down on him like a physical weight. A tense anticipation crackled in the air, as though the very fabric of reality were about to shift. Ethan bowed his head and studied the data scrolling across the hollow screen, his heart tangled in disbelief. All those nights he'd battled demons in his dreams. All those vows sworn, blade in hand, to defend the boundary between humans and half-demonkin. Was it all merely a video game? Had the Devil May Cry saga been nothing more than lines of code? "It's not just a game," bellowed Poros, his voice rolling through the chamber like thunder. "In our world, every decision is real, and every fight is merciless." Boros stepped forward, his voice ringing out like a proclamation. "I am Boros, Emperor of the Universe. I have crossed endless galaxies in search of a worthy opponent, until I met Saitama. At a glance, he appears ordinary, but his power eclipses all others." His posture stiffened with resolve. "I challenged him and failed. Yet, like you, I accepted that defeat. And that's why I'm here. Now, my sole ambition is to grow stronger and return someday to face Saitama again." Alex Mercer, who'd been standing apart in quiet contemplation, lifted his head. A faint, dangerous light flickered behind his eyes as he spoke. "My world was a wasteland, ravaged by a virus, where humans and grotesque mutants struggled to survive. I was once an ordinary scientist, until the plague transformed me into something far more. Now I command that power alone, stalking the darkness to deliver judgment. And yet, beneath it all, I'm haunted by questions about the very nature of humanity." A gentle voice cut through the tension. Albert Wesker, Resident Evil's ultimate villain, approached with an effortless smile that didn't reach his sharp, calculating eyes. "Virgil," he said softly, that single word carrying the weight of countless hidden schemes. "Your world may be nothing more than a game." Albert Wesker's voice echoed through the chamber, cold and confident. "But in ours, every choice sparks a chain reaction that can alter the fate of thousands. This is Resident Evil, a realm where viruses run rampant and the dead rise as monsters. I am Albert Wesker, Umbrella's hidden ace. I don't just chase raw power, I pursue the very next step in human evolution. We exist beyond mere notions of good and evil. We are the children of our era, pawns dancing on the strings of destiny." Ethan's dark eyes flared with a fierce light, an insatiable hunger for unknown strength, a steely resolve to surpass his own limits. He turned his hand over, examining the strange sigil burned into his flesh, the mark of the Lord God. It was more than a brand. It felt like a key to another reality, unlocking doors to infinite possibilities. A holographic display sprang to life before him, cascading data in shimmering blue lines. Each fragment of information washed over Ethan's mind like a tidal wave. Shock and exhilaration warred within him as the words imprinted themselves on his thoughts. "Travel between worlds." Ethan whispered the phrase, and images flooded his imagination. The lofty towers of ancient castles bathed in moonlight, the buzzing neon streets of futuristic cities, tangled temples half swallowed by jungle, and beyond them all, the silent expanse of a star-dusted universe. In that moment, he knew his destiny lay not in any single world, but in every world he dared to traverse. He realized this was far more than a routine assignment. It was an odyssey through time and space, the ultimate trial of his will and skill. Complete the mission and earn points. Ethan's finger hovered over the task list projected before him. Each entry crackled with unknown dangers, but the prizes gleamed temptingly. Points that would become the foundation of his power in this strange new world, the very currency he'd use to fuel his revenge. A thin smile tugged at his lips as he imagined how he'd spend those points, enhancing his body, mastering new abilities, making himself strong enough that no one could ever break him again. "Redeem enhanced rewards," he murmured, scrolling down. His eyes lingered on the upgrade options, a permanent boost to his stamina and strength, specialized combat skills, even the chance to awaken latent supernatural talents. Every line made his pulse quicken. But reason tempered his excitement. Nothing here would come for free. He'd have to push himself harder than ever, tackling one grueling mission after another if he hoped to climb this ladder of power. Ethan drew a steady breath. The path ahead would be brutal, but that only made the stakes higher, the rewards sweeter. With resolve burning in his chest, he tapped the first mission and accepted his fate. Ethan had never known fear when faced with a challenge. His mind burned with a single purpose: to become stronger, to avenge past wrongs, and to prove his own worth. Lord God, he tilted his head back and gazed into the distant sky. Though he knew the primordial deity wasn't physically present, its power suffused everything around him, both the instrument of his vengeance and the law he must obey. Ethan understood that he was little more than a pawn in the Lord God's grand design. Yet he chose to see his role as a chance for rebirth, a test to confirm his value. Standing on either side of him, Wesker and Boros watched the light of resolve flare up in Ethan's eyes. They recognized that their newest teammate had fully embraced the mission. Team Boss wasn't merely a code name, it was a creed, a relentless pursuit of power and self-transcendence. "It seems you understand," Wesker said, stepping forward with the intention of placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan met him with a leveled gaze, and Wesker chuckled softly, retracting his hand. "Remember," he continued, "there are no weak teammates here, only those who haven't pushed themselves hard enough. Each one of us is striving to be stronger." Boros leaned in, his tone low and unwavering. "And Team Boss is composed of those chosen by the Lord God, the strong, determined few who will seize their destiny. Our goal," the speaker declared, "is to become the brightest force among all teams, the very summit that the weak can only dream of reaching." Boros gave a firm nod. "And remember, our foes will be just as formidable. Some may even hail from other worlds or dimensions. But united, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Let us join hands and strive for greater heights." Ethan had already pulled up their profiles the moment their names were spoken. After all, these were the teammates he would be counting on. Boros's record was undeniably impressive. Wesker's, on the other hand, was unremarkable. Alex's was only marginally better. Still, in this place, everything, even the legendary full powers of the magic swordsman Sparta that Ethan coveted, could be bought, sold, or swapped. He reminded himself that no dossier was infallible. Until he saw their abilities in action, he couldn't be certain any of the information was entirely accurate. Chapter Header 91, Exploring the World. Ethan surveyed the empty space before him, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. Virgil's brief hesitation had been just as he'd planned, but truly, whether Virgil suspected his ruse or not, the outcome remained the same. For his own amusement, Ethan had forged a private realm within the main god space, a pocket dimension he could shape at will. Here, he'd invited an eclectic cast of icons. Tony Stark tinkering at his workbench, Batman lurking in the shadows, Thor sharpening his hammer. Even King Frieza sneered from a distant ledge, while Goku stretched and flexed, eager for the next challenge. And these were only the beginning. Any soul, hero or villain, who crossed Ethan's path could find themselves drawn into this grand arena. Meanwhile, not far away, Dante and Nero knelt beside Virgil's motionless body. To them, their brother was dead, his breathing stilled, his eyes closed. Neither realized that Virgil's true essence had slipped away to another world entirely. Dante bowed his head. He'd grown accustomed, almost numb, to losing Virgil, yet the pain never truly vanished. He pressed a hand to his heart, masking the sting in a practiced silence. Even as sorrow welled within him, he refused to betray it. "I'm sorry, Dante," Ethan said softly, stepping forward. "I couldn't keep him safe." Dante lifted his gaze, his dark eyes unreadable. He shook his head. "Don't blame yourself, Ethan. It was his choice." Ethan met his glance, aware of the unspoken truths between them. Had he not intervened, both he and Virgil might have fallen in the struggle. Now, at least, the cost had been borne by one rather than all. Nero rose to his feet, brushing dust from his jacket. He offered Ethan a curt nod, gratitude, regret, and resolve all tangled in that simple gesture. As the trio turned away from Virgil's still form, the air around them shimmered. In another plane of existence, the winds of a new world stirred, waiting to reveal its secrets. And so, with heavy hearts and unbreakable wills, they set forth to explore the realms that lay beyond. Dante was the next to go, leaving the aftermath to Ethan and the Magic Sword Order. Nero watched Dante's retreating back, knowing his old comrade must be in turmoil, otherwise he wouldn't have slipped away in silence. Ethan had finished soaking up the golden haze of the Devil May Cry world and was preparing to leave behind a phantom, an illusionary trace, a footnote to his passing. As for his true purpose here, it centered on Virgil's service within the boss team of the main god space. Virgil stood motionless before the newly appeared gate of time and space. Its shimmering frame connected them to unknown worlds and missions, yet it seemed to hum with unseen rules and unbearable pressure. The air buzzed with a subtle tension, yet there was also a resigned calm, as if everyone present had long since grown used to skirting the edge of life and death. "You're saying the Lord God simply erases any boss who refuses to obey, or who grows too arrogant?" Virgil's deep voice cut through the hush, probing for every nuance of Wesker's reply. Behind the team's easygoing facade, he now sensed the cold, remorseless mechanism of divine selection at work. Ethan watched in silence as Wesker nodded, a complex smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, part resignation to the cruelty of their past, part clear-sighted acceptance of the challenge before them. At last he spoke, his voice calm but firm. That's exactly it. The Divine Realm isn't a greenhouse. It's an endless survival game. Every one of us, every boss, is a player. The reason we're still here is that we've learned not just to survive under its rules, but to stay humble and work together in a field full of powerful opponents. Wesker's eyes grew intense as he turned to regard each person around the table. Strength matters, he continued, but you'll only go so far on brute force alone. Wisdom, strategy, and above all teamwork are what count. We call ourselves the United Bosses not for show, but because we know that, against the endless trials set by the gods, only unity gives us any chance. Virgil leaned back, unsurprised that Wesker had taken the lead in speaking. Boros and Alex simply weren't the types to indulge in long talks. Ethan, too, felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over him. In that moment, he understood exactly why they fought, and why they fought together. Ethan's very presence radiated a silent warning. Strangers stay away. He was dangerous, immensely powerful, and emphatically not human. To him, ordinary people were nothing more than walking viruses. At least Wesker had the decency to speak. Virgil, Wesker, and the others stepped through the gate of light. The world shifted in an instant, and they found themselves standing in an environment they'd never seen before. A glowing sigil, the mark of the main god, hovered before them, accompanied by a single line of text. New task, explore the current world. Ethan, however, was already one step ahead. He knew precisely where they had arrived, the world of Naruto. It wasn't a higher dimensional realm in the traditional sense, yet it thrummed with power and legends capable of shaking the soul. Nowhere was this more evident than in the existence of the Otsutsuki clan, beings whose very nature redefined the word extraordinary. And at the apex of their myths stood Otsutsuki Shibaju. His name echoed across universes like that of a creation deity, for he was said to have transcended the borders of a single world and entered a far grander dimension. His most astounding gift was manifestation, the power to convert every thought and spark of imagination in his mind into concrete reality. In the cosmos of Naruto, few forces could rival such godlike prowess. Whether he wills a star to fall, stirs the oceans, or shapes the cycle of life and death, all bends to his command. Even among the exalted ancestors of the Otsutsuki clan, such creative power is virtually unmatched. What makes Shibaju truly awe-inspiring, however, is that his strength is never fixed. With every chakra fruit, each brimming with cosmic energy that he consumes, his mastery over reality deepens. In time, he will be able to rewrite the fundamental laws of the universe itself. Every feast on those fruits subtly reorders existence, drawing him inexorably closer to the lofty realm of true godhood. But Shibaju's might does not end with world-building alone. He also wields a prodigious ocular technique. His eyes cut through the veil of time, granting him a real-time view of every corner of the cosmos, and even the power to look back and witness events lost to history. This temporal vision is, without question, the linchpin of the Otsutsuki clan's quest to unravel the deepest mysteries of the universe. Ethan focused his gaze, activating the ancestral eye technique that had served him so well, only to be met with an impenetrable barrier. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't peer into the world that existed before Shibai's birth. It was as if that era lay beyond even divine reach, sealed off in time. He reflected on what he already knew about the Otsutsuki clan. Their strength sprang from two sources, the purity of their bloodline and the depth of their personal cultivation. To outsiders, the Otsutsuki seemed invincible, but beneath the surface their power varied greatly. Take Ishiki, for example. As one of the clan's foremost leaders, he was renowned for both raw might and a cunning intellect capable of impossible schemes. Yet even Ishiki stood in awe of the being from whom his name is forever shaded, Kaguya, the first ancestor. After consuming the chakra fruit herself, she attained a level of power so overwhelming that, before her transformation, she had already wounded Ishiki grievously in direct combat. In contrast, the three siblings poised to descend now, Momoshiki, Urashiki, and Kinshiki, were far less exceptional. Their abilities, while formidable to any outside observer, exemplified the average strength of a well-blooded Otsutsuki warrior. Compared to Kaguya or Ishiki, they were still very much apprentices, on the path to godhood. And as Ethan stared into the void of prehistory, he realized that understanding their limits would be just as crucial as confronting their power. Chapter 892, Virgil's Journey to Another World. Among the Otsutsuki, Momoshiki occupies a position near the top of the hierarchy. Yet even after consuming Kinshiki's chakra fruit, he still falls short of Ishiki's power under ordinary conditions. Kinshiki and Urashiki, by comparison, hold more modest ranks. Though both are undeniably formidable, neither approaches the godlike strength of the Six Paths. In direct clashes with Kage-level shinobi, Kinshiki can match their attacks blow for blow, but he struggles to deliver a truly lethal strike, and can even find himself briefly overwhelmed. When Urashiki once traveled back in time, he was decisively defeated by a middle-aged Sasuke and Jiraiya, alongside Boruto and a young Naruto. That defeat only cemented the fact that for all their might, these two aren't among the clan's absolute elites. Still, it would be unfair to label Kinshiki and Urashiki as the Otsutsuki's disgrace. Even Kinshiki, the lowest in their status ladder, receives offerings from his peers, a clear sign that his influence and standing within the clan remain significant. Ethan had never imagined he'd end up in this world. Among the Otsutsuki, Urashiki's rare time and space hopping ability guaranteed him a place in the clan, even though he sometimes lost his battles. For Ethan and the others, exploration missions like this one were routine fare, especially against the assembled bosses. All but Boros had been conjured from Ethan's own memories and imagination, yet oddly enough, their personalities and fighting styles manifested almost exactly as their real-world counterparts. Exploration mission. Completion reward, 3,000 points. Failure penalty, minus 5,000 points. A cold, mechanical voice echoed inside each of their minds, courtesy of the main god space, driving home the importance of the assignment. Virgil looked around calmly. Is there anything special we need to watch out for on this mission? His composed tone masked both excitement and wariness. From his seat, Wesker, the seasoned reincarnationist, rose to his feet and answered. There's no hard deadline, but we can't afford to dawdle. We should map the terrain quickly, identify any high-threat bosses, and withdraw before they can rally reinforcements. Virgil nodded. He turned to Ethan. You've got a knack for predicting enemy behavior. Lead the scouting party. Ethan swallowed. Despite the cool confidence he tried to project, his stomach knotted at the thought of facing these half-real bosses, especially Urashiki, whose teleportation could turn any straightforward skirmish into a deadly chase. He forced himself to stand. All right, Ethan said. Let's move out. As the group assembled their weapons and adjusted their gear, the main god space's reminder buzzed gently in the back of their minds. Exploration missions weren't just exercises in combat. They were the fastest route to points, power, and ultimately survival in this strange new world. I suggest we split up, each of us covering a different region, and reconvene here in 3 hours. Above all, don't let the locals learn we're reincarnators. No need to stir up unnecessary trouble. The other bosses nodded, each departing according to their own plan. Ethan, too, slipped away without hesitation, eager to strike out on his own. For ordinary newcomers to this world, venturing off alone would be reckless in the extreme. But Ethan, accustomed to the solitude and cunning required of a villainous boss, saw it as the perfect chance to prove his strength. He welcomed challenges, and he knew that only the strong-hearted and powerful could survive in this cruel land. Emerging from the forest's shadow, Ethan paused at its edge. The terrain before him was alien, yet undeniably real, a testament to the omnipotent godhead who had summoned them here. He let his gaze roam over rolling hills and distant peaks, wondering once more, was this truly another world, or merely an extension of the divine realm? With curiosity burning in his chest, Ethan took his first bold steps into the unknown. Each footfall led him farther from the safety of the group, and deeper into the adventure that lay ahead. Ethan stood beneath a patchy sky, afternoon sunlight filtering through thin clouds and dancing across his black windbreaker. The light played up the jacket's sharp lines, lending him an almost untouchable air. All around him stretched alien flora. Some trees soared until their leafy crowns vanished into the mist, as though they might brush the clouds themselves. Others hugged the ground in riotous hues, their bioluminescent petals pulsing softly in the dim light and drawing flitting insects to their glowing folds. Each breath he took tasted of pure vitality, as though life itself had been distilled into the air. He heard the voices before he saw their owners, a chorus of firm, cautious shouts. "Halt! Identify yourselves!" echoed through the forest. Ethan pivoted, scanning for the source. Then they stepped into view. Half a dozen armed figures, clad in matching uniforms, forehead guards bearing an unfamiliar insignia glittering in the muted sun. Their stances spoke of discipline and power. Where am I?" Ethan asked, voice calm. He flexed his fingers inside his coat pockets, testing for concealed weapons he knew weren't there. His mind raced back to the main god space, to the many teams of reincarnators vying for supremacy. He was a member of the boss team, the strongest group of all, and he trusted his own prowess in any world. If this was some strange new realm, he would master it just as easily. He met the leader's steady gaze. "Tell me," he said, "what is this place, and why are you pointing weapons at me?" When Ethan heard this, a surge of pride swelled in his chest. According to Wesker, though the boss team enjoys a fearsome reputation, there is still one force that can stand toe-to-toe with them: the Protagonist team. True to its name, the Protagonist team is composed of each world's chosen heroes, individuals handpicked by the main god and summoned into the divine realm to represent their own stories. Yet even against these specially selected champions, the boss team's record remains dominant. Wesker, a newcomer to the third generation of boss operatives, had witnessed firsthand how the once unstoppable second generation finally fell. He went on to explain that beyond the Protagonist team, there are also villain teams, extra teams, and countless other alliances formed by humans and alien races from the heavens and the myriad worlds beyond. "I've even seen a caterpillar," he said, lowering his voice, "a creature roughly the size of a person. With nothing but its own flesh, it could trigger star-shattering explosions, capable of tearing planets apart in a single burst." "Where did you encounter something like that?" the lead warrior demanded, frowning in disbelief. "Out here," another operative replied, gesturing toward the distant tree line, "on the outskirts of the Hidden Leaf Village. Anyone who crosses this boundary without permission will be treated as an intruder." The Chunin captain's voice rang out with unmistakable authority. At his signal, the squad fanned out and formed a tight semicircle around Ethan. He returned their scrutiny with a slight, inscrutable smile, and that effortless calm sent a ripple of unease through the Leaf Shinobi. "Konoha Gakure," Ethan mused silently, though his features remained smooth and inexpressive. "An intriguing place." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the captain warned, stepping forward. He studied Ethan's unfamiliar garb and the faintly menacing aura emanating from him. "Come with us." Then, with a gesture toward the heavy blade at Ethan's side, he added, "First, let me examine your sword." Ethan drew the Yanmo sword in a single fluid motion, its blade far longer and broader than any kunai or standard ninjato. The genin behind the captain gasped. "A samurai's nodachi?" the captain guessed, voice low. "From the Iron Country, perhaps?" Before they could question him further, eager flurries of steel filled the air. Shuriken and kunai whistled toward Eth, and in a blur. The Leaf Village's young shinobi had made their move, and now faced the consequences of underestimating a true warrior. Their limited chakra reserves kept them from performing most ninjutsu, so they had to rely on ninja tools for their attacks. Only a Chunin was permitted to use multiple ninjutsu techniques in combat. Chapter 893, The Boss Team's First Move. Ethan's eyes snapped into focus, as though he could see through every trick and illusion. When a volley of shuriken and kunai hurtled toward him, he didn't panic or dart away. Instead, he pivoted ever so slightly, almost casually. The razor-sharp blades struck an unseen barrier, veering off course to embed themselves in the earth or clatter harmlessly at his feet. "Pathetic toys," he murmured, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You really think those can hurt me?" With that, Ethan moved. In the blink of an eye, he wove through the ranks of Konoha Genin like a specter. His speed was so great it left their heads spinning. his posture so effortless it resembled a dance, each step and turn flowing with perfect, silent rhythm. It was combat elevated to an art form. The young ninja's confident formation shattered at once. They fanned out, eyes wide, desperately seeking a single flaw in Ethan's defense, only to discover there was none. Ethan's Yan demon sword ignited with crackling black lightning, tracing brilliant arcs through the air. Each swing snapped so sharply that it seemed to tear open the very fabric of space. Against him, the combined ninjutsu and taijutsu of the Hidden Leaf's genin looked feeble. Every strike was either effortlessly deflected or fell harmlessly short of even brushing the hem of his cloak. "So this is all your vaunted Hidden Leaf village can offer?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with amusement and disdain. Yet beneath that tone lay an unmistakable curiosity, a desire to probe this unfamiliar world and discover his place in it through combat. He had no wish to slaughter these shinobi, he simply yearned to learn. The lead chunin's face went pale, but he refused to yield. As the village's guardian, he understood that he could not back down. Squaring his shoulders, he inhaled deeply, letting chakra flood his body. With renewed determination, he prepared to unleash a more powerful ninjutsu, and the battle resumed. Wind escape, major breakthrough. At the chunin captain's low shout, a raging whirlwind sprang to life around him, the air whipping into a furious boil. The vortex spun faster than any ordinary wind jutsu, its power obvious to everyone watching, yet Ethan merely smiled. He lifted the Yama sword in one smooth motion, and a jet of black sword energy shot forth like a falling star, slicing through the night sky straight into the heart of the storm. Boom! The clash sent a concussive wave rippling outward, tossing dust and debris through the clearing. When the dust finally settled, the whirlwind lay cleaved in two, its wind power evaporated. And there stood Ethan, perfectly composed, no scorch on his clothes, not a hair out of place. The captain staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. How is this possible?" he stammered, voice trembling between shock and awe. In that instant, he understood that the gap between his own skills and Ethan's was far greater than any simple rank or technique could measure. Ethan sheathed his sword with a quiet confidence. "Your Hidden Leaf village is even more intriguing than I'd heard," he said, his tone now serious and expectant. "Perhaps this is where I'll find the answers I seek." Ethan surveyed the aftermath of the failed jutsu. He'd recognized the wind escape and the great breakthrough techniques, only the chakra signatures felt twisted, unfamiliar. No matter, such elementary attacks were beneath him. With a subtle flick of his wrist, he unraveled the unstable barrier, scattering its pieces across the courtyard. "Red Fang," barked Captain Qingfeng, his voice sharp and commanding. "Return to the village at once. Tell them we'll hold him here." Red Fang, the slender genin with flame-red hair and lightning reflexes, shivered but snapped a salute. "Right away, Captain." He vanished down the winding path before anyone could stop him. The rest of Qingfeng's team exchanged glances, but offered no protest. Though the captain's own speed was legendary, they needed someone nimble enough to carry the warning. Ethan sheathed at his sword and fixed the captain and his squad with a cool, appraising stare. "Before we proceed," he said, voice calm as still water, "I want to know exactly where I am and who all of you are." Captain Qingfeng drew a steady breath. "You're in the Hidden Leaf village." Ethan tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "That name alone isn't enough. I need more details." Silence fell over the tense gathering as they prepared to answer the stranger's demand. Ethan had gathered all the basic intelligence on this world and slipped away before Konoha's reinforcements could arrive. News had already reached the Hidden Leaf's command. The patrol stationed outside the village had encountered a formidable intruder. The Uchiha security squad was dispatched at once, backed by the regular patrol team and Ambu operatives. Anyone capable of overwhelming a Chunin and several Genin was no ordinary shinobi, in all likelihood a special Jonin. They could not be taken lightly. Meanwhile, Ethan tested the Yama sword's ability to pierce the barrier between worlds. With a single, seamless slash, the blade carved a cross-shaped rift in the void. The tier widened rapidly into a vast, yawning corridor. Stepping through, he emerged into a chamber where Poros and the others were already waiting. At once, all eyes turned to him. From the calculating look in Wesker's gaze, Ethan realized just how dangerous his ally, or adversary really was. "How did it go?" Wesker asked quietly, his tone neither friendly nor hostile. "What did you learn?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "I just met the shinobi of Konoha Village and got the basic rundown on this world." Boros gave a dismissive snort. "There are 5 hidden villages, and Konoha's the strongest, but ninja powers only go so far." Wesker cracked a smile. "Sure, their skills are impressive, but our BOSS team isn't losing sleep over them, yet." Ethan glanced between them. "Remember, this is an exploration mission. If we rush in blind, we risk derailing the world's story and turning a routine op into a nightmare." Wesker raised an eyebrow. "Derail the story? You mean there's a plot we're not supposed to mess with?" "Exactly," Ethan settled forward. "Every world follows a narrative framework, details the Overmind exposes in its sphere. I haven't accessed this one yet, but it'll be the same. Key events and power shifts laid out like chapters in a book. Upend them, and the world fights back." Wesker nodded slowly. "Understood. We tread carefully around the main events so we don't break the narrative or get swamped by unforeseen challenges." Just then, Alex spoke up from the corner, a wry grin on his face. "By the way, I ate one of those ninjas, picked up half a dozen new jutsu and some insider world data while I was at it." There was a brief silence. Then Ethan cracked a smile. "Nice work, Alex. Let's compile your findings and map out the storyline before we make our next move." Chapter 894, Wesker, Too Difficult to Lead. Ethan hadn't said much, but Virgil had been reading his transmissions all along. He understood exactly what Ethan's ability could do. If he put that power to work gathering intelligence, he'd be virtually unstoppable. "What did you learn?" Virgil asked, his tone serious. Ethan leaned forward. "This realm calls itself the ninja world. Its warriors are organized into an elite profession known as ninjas. The one I encountered was a jonin, the highest rank. He's incredibly powerful, far beyond ordinary shinobi, but still no match for you." Virgil's brow furrowed. In a world brimming with hidden threats, information was as precious as life itself. He sat up straighter, eyes fixed on Ethan, eager for every detail. "Explain their powers to me. How are their ranks structured? What abilities define each level?" Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, assembling the fragments of memory he'd absorbed from that devoured jonin. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and precise, ready to lay out his findings in clear, concise terms. Ethan leaned back, his eyes thoughtful yet alive with conviction. "A ninja's true power comes from mastering chakra, that unique energy born of both body and mind. With the right training, we can shape it into all kinds of ninjutsu, taijutsu, or even powerful genjutsu. As you know, shinobi ranks begin at Jainin, rise through Chunin, and culminate in Jonin status. Becoming a Jonin isn't just about technique. It means you've survived countless battles, accumulated wisdom, and learned how to lead others." He smiled, recalling the day he faced his first Jonin. His specialty was wind release. He could summon gusts that cut like blades or form shields in an instant. He moved so quickly you could swear you saw afterimages on the battlefield. His strength was leagues beyond mine, but it taught me this. Even with our own talents, we're not invincible. If we hone our skills and use them wisely, we'll more than hold our own in this world. Virgil studied Ethan's steady expression. In that moment, he understood the source of his friend's unwavering confidence, a deep, unshakable trust in his own abilities. Ethan knew that Alex's ability, the power to absorb and analyze every detail about a living organism, from memories and skills to certain innate techniques, was extraordinarily rare and potent. In the ninja world, such a talent would grant them an overwhelming advantage. "So," Wesker asked, leaning forward, "what have you learned about this world's political structure and power distribution?" Alex tapped a few commands on the interface. "The ninja world isn't a single unified realm. It's divided among 5 great nations, each centered around its own hidden village. Every village has its own ninjutsu traditions and cultural customs. While the nations sometimes cooperate, they also vie fiercely for resources, and disputes, whether over territory or ideology, often erupt into open conflict. The jonin I absorbed was from the Sand Village in the Land of Wind, famed worldwide for its powerful wind release techniques." At that moment, the Lord God system pinged again. The exploration gauge on the screen inched upward, yet it still hovered at an alarmingly low level. Wesker frowned, his fingers drumming the table as he considered their next move. "Is this as far as our exploration can go?" he asked. Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the table, watching the others as they mulled over their next move. The low lamplight cast long shadows across the room, and a tense silence hung in the air, until Wesker finally broke it. "It seems we need to gather more information," he said, folding his hands in front of him. Virgil straightened in his chair, arms crossing over his chest. A flicker of impatience passed through his eyes. He was a man of action, accustomed to solving problems head-on, and this methodical approach tried his temper. "Exploration," he muttered under his breath, such an abstract, drawn-out concept. Realizing his negativity might derail the discussion, Virgil cleared his throat and turned back to Wesker. "All right, but what exactly do you mean by exploration?" Wesker gave him a patient nod. "In simple terms, it's how well we come to understand the world around us. It isn't just about the roads we've traveled or the people we've met. It's about uncovering the hidden stories and secrets lurking in the shadows. Only once we've gathered enough of these fragments can we piece together the big picture." At that moment, Alex rose from his seat. As the team's resident strategist and intelligence expert, his perspective was indispensable. "Every new data point sharpens our vision," he added. "Without that clarity, we're simply stumbling around in the dark." Ethan met Alex's gaze and nodded. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but now they knew what had to be done. Track down every lost clue, no matter how deeply it was buried, until the full story finally came into focus. Ethan leaned forward, recalling Wesker's warning. "This world's complexity is beyond anything we've imagined. Every village, every household, even every shinobi could be hiding vital clues. If we rush in, we risk missing critical information or alerting our adversaries. We need a methodical, multi-layered strategy. Explore thoroughly, but stay safe." Wesker nodded, tapping a data slate. "Exactly. Our top priority must be expanding our reconnaissance. That means more village visits, interviews with local shinobi, and, when necessary, covert entry into those peaceful towns where secrets fester in the shadows. We'll comb through every rumor, every scrap of lore, until nothing goes unseen." Ethan studied a rough map of the region. "And while we're gathering intelligence, we'll need a reliable way to share it. Let's set up an underground network, trusted contacts in each settlement who can pass along updates with minimal risk." "Right," Wesker agreed. "Once we've cataloged the major players and unearthed those hidden threads, we can move on to Phase 2, identifying potential allies, and if required, high-value targets. Gradually, we'll carve out our sphere of influence, piece by piece. Only then can we decide whether to negotiate, coerce, or neutralize." Ethan squared his shoulders. "Then it's settled. We start today. Send scouting teams to the Daisen clan village, dispatch couriers to the port towns, and begin building our informant network. Every lead counts." Wesker activated the comlink. Boros and the other reincarnations are ready to begin surface sweeps. They know their mission isn't to conquer, just to explore. With their support and our intelligence grid, nothing in this world will remain hidden for long. As the morning sun climbed in the sky, Ethan and Wesker set their plan in motion, determined to unlock the secrets of this new realm, one clue at a time. Wesker leaned over the war table, eyes cold as steel. "When the moment is right, we'll force rival factions to fight for territory and resources on our terms. And with Alex's memory link ability, we can access the secrets of every ninja village, fill in every gap in our intel." Virgil bristled. All this scheming sounded like a waste of time. Why not strike the 5 great shinobi countries head-on? They're the powerhouses. Surely they hold all the answers. "So basically, you want us running errands and collecting scraps of information," he snapped. "Why not be straightforward? Find the strongest village, crush them, and we get what we need." He turned to Boros. "With your strength backing us, we could raise Konagakure and force the Hokage to hand over every secret." Boros let out a low chuckle, his grin widening. He thrived on direct action. Exactly. When true power stands behind you, obstacles simply cease to exist. His words carried a challenge, a blunt declaration that, in his view, raw force was the only language the world understood. Wesker shook his head, a mixture of frustration and resolve in his eyes. "In a world we know nothing about, it would be foolish to make enemies on a whim. We have to look beyond our immediate goals and think about the long T. If we become the target of public scrutiny, we'll only invite endless trouble and drain our resources. Chapter 895, The Hokage Rock Has Vanished. So what? A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky as the silhouettes of the fallen Hokage Rock lay bare against the storm clouds. For a heartbeat, no one spoke until Virgil's icy voice cut through the silence. Hokage Rock is gone, he said, arms folded. So what? Wesker met his eye and bowed his head. He'd tried and failed to persuade Virgil to follow the group's plan. With a resigned sigh, he offered a compromise. Very well. We all have our own methods. If you'd rather go your own way, I respect that. Just promise me one thing. If you hit an impasse or uncover something critical, you contact us immediately. He'd long suspected that collecting elite warriors, each a boss in his own realm, would breed as much pride as strength. Forcing unanimity among such personalities would only backfire. Better to let them operate independently, on the chance they might share crucial intelligence when it mattered most. Virgil snorted in acknowledgement. Humph, exactly what I intend. With that, he turned on his heel and strode off, his posture as unyielding as his resolve. Boros watched him go, a broad grin splitting his face and a fierce light sparking in his eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was eager to meet them head-on. And somewhere in the gathering shadows, Ethan, once known as Luther, stood silently observing, ready to follow his own path when the moment came. Ethan smiled and folded his arms. Then I'll go meet those so-called heavyweights and see what they're really made of. With those words, he condensed into a pillar of light and streaked off in the opposite direction from Virgil. Wesker and Alex exchanged a knowing glance. As rival supervirus overlords, they had more in common than they cared to admit. Since Alex discovered his own viral heritage, he'd tipped into near hysteria, amplifying the pariah strain's perfected blacklight virus to truly frightening levels. Yet every mutation, every escalation, had been orchestrated by Ethan. Wesker, ever hungry for more power, suspected nothing. He had injected himself with every pathogenic sample in the Resident Evil archives, tapping into a divine energy to fuse them into one unstoppable entity. Ancient fungal molds were next on his list, but that time was not yet. In this world, he saw the chance to shatter every boundary. He might even consume Alex himself, if Alex weren't so perilously unpredictable. Meanwhile, Virgil arrived at the Hidden Leaf Village. Sunlight filtered through sparse clouds, casting a shifting mosaic of light and shadow across the gates of Konoha. Golden light and deep shadows intertwined into a deceptively peaceful tableau, a peace Ethan knew was fragile. He lifted a hand, letting his fingertips brush the ambient energy of the barrier that shimmered before him. This ancient, intricate ninjutsu was meant to shield the village from outside threats, to isolate it from danger. To Ethan, however, it was merely a curtain against mortal footsteps. Space itself, he thought, was just another form of power. A faint smile curved his lips, the surest sign of his confidence in his own strength. In one smooth motion, he drew the Yama sword. With a precise arc, he slashed at the air, and the blade carved a glowing path through the barrier. Where the sword had passed, a slender crack tore open in space, dark and hungry, devouring the light around it. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slipped through the rift in an instant, leaving only a few lingering ripples in the air as proof of his passage. On the other side, within the walls of the Hidden Leaf Village, he paused, silent, patient, and ready. Ethan drifted through the winding lanes and scattered houses of the village, almost like a shadow, observing everything with the sharp, unblinking focus of a predator. He took in every detail, the faded banners fluttering overhead, the soot-streaked tiles of the rooftops, the soft chatter of vendors, trying to discern the unspoken rules that governed this place. Yet no matter how closely he watched, it all felt small and fragile, as if the world around him could shatter under a careless breath. The villagers went about their routines, fetching water from the well, tending market stalls, greeting neighbors in clustered conversations. Now and then, pairs of curious eyes lifted to stare at the stranger in their midst, but their interest was half-hearted, faint as a passing breeze. To Ethan, their caution was no different from a blind man groping at an elephant's flank. He was like a ghost drifting among them, noticed, yet unable to rouse anything more than idle whispers. His purpose, however, was neither to blend in nor to be ignored. Ethan had come for one clear goal: to find the village leader, the Hokage. He believed the only surefire way to draw her out of the shadows was to force a commotion big enough that she could not ignore it. A well-timed disruption, he decided, would leave her no choice but to reveal herself. He had just taken another step toward putting his plan into motion when his gaze drifted upward and caught sight of something monumental: the towering Hokage rock. There, carved high into the cliff face, were the stern, proud visages of every Hokage who had ever led this village. Weathered by wind and rain, the stone features still radiated strength and resolve. To Ethan, they were more than mere monuments. They were living testaments to the triumphs and sacrifices of every shinobi who had ever called this place home. In that moment, Ethan something stirred deep inside him, a quiet anticipation. Soon, the village's guardian would step forward, and then he would know whether he could bend this hidden world to his will, or become yet another forgotten face etched in stone. Virgil's heart quickened with excitement. If he turned this into a public challenge, he was certain he'd draw out the village's strongest fighters. He stood beneath the great Hokage rock and lifted his gaze. Carved into the mountainside were the faces of every past Hokage, some stern and imposing, others gentle and benevolent, each one a silent testament to Konoha's triumphs and trials. A gleam of amusement flickered in Virgil's eyes. This was the perfect stage for his demonstration. "Let's see if your legendary Hokages can stand up to this," he murmured. In his hand, the Yan Demon sword vibrated with barely contained power, emitting a low, ominous hum. All at once, Virgil drew his arm back and unleashed a decisive slash. The blade's silver arc tore through the air like lightning, charged with enough force to rent the very fabric of space. For an instant, time seemed to hush itself, and the whole world trembled. When the sword finally struck the rock face, there was no thunderous crash, only the quiet birth of a single hairline fracture. It appeared almost mournful, like nature itself voicing a silent protest, before it split wider and raced across the entire monument. The stone faces of the Hokage carved into the mountainside shuddered under the impact. Cracks snaked outward, widening into gaping fissures. With an earth-shaking roar, the entire outcrop tilted and then came crashing down. Dust billowed into the sky as massive slabs of granite smashed onto the village below, turning a once proud monument into rubble. All across Konoha, alarms sounded. Doors flew open, and terrified villagers poured into the streets, staring in horror at the ruined rock that had symbolized their peace and prosperity. Parents clutched their children. Elder shinobi exchanged grim looks. Everyone felt the sting of betrayal. Amid the chaos, a squad of elite leaf ninjas sprang into action, racing toward the epicenter of the destruction. They emerged through the haze to find Ethan standing before the shattered monolith, his back to them, as though he'd meant to pose for this moment of ruin. His expression was cold, triumphant. "Who are you?" barked one Jonin, forming hand seals in seconds. "What have you done to our Hokage rock?" Another stepped forward, sword drawn. "Stand down, or face the consequences." Ethan's lips curved into a slow, contemptuous smile. He looked up at Touré, the fallen statues of the first through fourth Hokage, now indistinguishable from broken stone, and shrugged his shoulders. "I came for a message," he said, voice iron calm, "and I don't plan to leave without it." As the dust swirled around them, the ninjas readied themselves. The heart of Konoha had been shattered. Now they would see if its spirit still endured. Chapter 896, Ethan's Solo Village Sweep. Ethan turned his back on the gathered shinobi and called out with calm confidence, "Who is the Hokage?" A stunned hush fell over the assembly. Who was this stranger, striding in as if he owned the place, and not even knowing who led the village? Finally, a voice answered, "I am the Hokage. And you are?" The speaker who stepped forward was none other than Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage himself. Ethan pivoted to face the old man, his dark eyes appraising every wrinkle and line of age. He'd expected a mighty warrior, a champion clad in legend. Instead, he saw only an elderly figure in simple robes. Disappointment flickered across Ethan's face. Then, almost at once, it was replaced by fierce curiosity and a gnawing hunger for power. "So you're the Hokage," Ethan said, voice low but clear. Hiruzen smiled wryly. Not a bad conclusion for someone who just arrived. The third Hokage's amusement gave way to genuine puzzlement. Surely you've heard of Konoha's leader before this? Ethan's expression went cold, lips curling into a thin line. I've seen enough of the world's secrets. Tell me, old man, what makes you worthy of that title? A tense murmur rippled through the shinobi ranks. At the edge of the clearing, Shimura Danzo bristled with outrage. He strode forward, his hand dropping to the hilt of his blade. How dare you question the Hokage's authority? He snarled, his voice echoing off the village walls. Ethan met Danzo's glare without flinching, as if daring anyone to challenge him. The air crackled with anticipation. Two forces, each unmoved by convention, standing on the brink of conflict before all of Konoha. Hiruzen, enough talk. Just arrest him. The command, heavy with authority, brooked no refusal. The surrounding shinobi stiffened at once, tension crackling through the air. Uchiha Fugaku, head of the Uchiha clan, rose to his feet and positioned himself before Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Master Hokage, allow me to handle this insolent upstart. With resolute determination, Fugaku wove a series of hand seals and expelled a colossal sphere of fire. Fire style, great fireball technique. Though the earlier destruction of the Hokage monument had already shaken them, the new attack stoked their anger still further. The gigantic fireball blossomed into a searing inferno and hurtled toward Ethan. As patriarch of the Uchiha, Fugaku's fire jutsu was unrivaled, its blistering heat and blinding light surging directly at its target. Ethan met the oncoming blaze with a faint, mocking smile. A flash of disdain colored his calm eyes as the inferno bore down upon him. Ethan lifted his hand in a casual gesture, and in an instant, 3 dark blue phantom swords coalesced in midair. They hurtled forward like streaks of lightning, slicing through the atmosphere and colliding squarely with the roaring fireball. Ethan preferred phantom swords to firearms as his go-to long-range weapon. Forged entirely from his mana, these spectral blades could be hurled as projectiles, spun into a protective barrier around him, or arrayed in formations to bind and assault his enemy. Each blade glowed with an electric blue light and bore the unmistakable silhouette of the legendary Blade of Power. Yet these were nothing more than pure arcane energy. The moment the phantom swords met the inferno, a blinding flash erupted. The once mighty fireball buckled, then collapsed inward and dissolved into nothingness, as though it had never been. Even more astonishing, the 3 phantom swords emerged from the blast untouched. With renewed velocity, they streaked straight toward Uchiha Fugaku. Fugaku stumbled back, eyes wide. He had never witnessed such a bizarre, overwhelmingly powerful attack. Ethan wasted no time invoking the instant body technique. In an instant, he blurred into a series of after-images, twisting through the air as phantom swords lunged for him. Each time he raced toward safety, the ethereal blades seemed to anticipate his moves, forcing him deeper into retreat. Across the field, Uchiha Fugaku saw his chance. Fire escape, dragon flame technique, he roared. A torrent of scarlet fire shot forward in a razor-straight jet, engulfing the phantom swords in a fierce inferno and buying Ethan precious seconds. At the heart of the fray, Ethan stood unmoving, as solid as a reef amid crashing waves. Glaring at his opponents, his eyes were icy and unreadable, as if he could see straight through every ruse and diversion. Even faced with a team of shinobi whose varied talents wove together in perfect harmony, Ethan never flinched. Nara Shikaku's shadow imitation technique, the opening move of the famed pig-deer-cho formation, had been executed to perfection, and the battle had only just begun. Ethan's shadow suddenly writhed and stretched outward like a living thing, sweeping over Shikaku's own shadow in a bid to pin the stranger in place. But Ethan's body pulsed with demonic energy far beyond mortal comprehension, an overwhelming force that made ordinary ninjutsu seem feeble. The moment Shikaku's shadow collided with Ethan's, that infernal power burst forth in a pure, savage surge, tearing Shikaku's technique apart as effortlessly as ice melting under a blazing sun. There was no trace left of the shadow's restraint. The backlash recoiled straight into Shikaku himself. His face drained of color, and he staggered, struggling to stay upright. It was clear the counterattack had taken a punishing toll on him. What? Shikaku stared at Ethan in disbelief. He had never encountered such ruthless power that dispelled his shadow imitation jutsu without even a trace. Worse still was the menacing force rippling beneath Ethan's calm exterior, forcing Shikaku to reassess the threat before him. Meanwhile, Yamanaka Inoichi saw his opening and refused to relent. He recognized that this was the critical moment to seize control of Ethan, and he was prepared to strike. If Ethan failed, the fallout would be catastrophic. He quickly formed a hand seal, closed his eyes, and focused every ounce of his chakra on the heart conversion technique, aiming to penetrate Virgil's mind. But Virgil's mental defenses were just as formidable. An impenetrable shield protected his thoughts, and when Ethan's psychic assault struck it, it rang out like metal on metal, utterly ineffective. Damn, his mental strength is off the charts, Ethan muttered under his breath, bracing himself for the backlash. The repelled energy threw him off balance, beads of sweat springing to his brow. In that instant, Akimichi Choji finished his own preparations. Muscles bulged and expanded like balloons, his body inflating to an immense size, power rippling through every fiber. With a roar that shook the air, Choji swung his massive fist, its force enough to shatter boulders, straight at Virgil. Virgil merely smiled, a cool expression laced with contempt. Unfazed, he lifted his right hand and with a casual flick of his fingers unleashed a counter so subtle and swift that Choji's oncoming blow seemed to dissolve before it even landed. In an instant, the 6 phantom swords converged into a single, dazzling beam, like a meteor streaking across the night sky, and slammed into Akimichi Choji's raised fist. With a deafening crack, blade light met muscle, unleashing a flash so bright it seared the air and a shockwave that rippled outward in a thunderous roar. Chapter 898, Sarutobi Hiruzen's Resolve. Sarumo. Hiruzen's cry echoed across the battlefield, his heart clenched at the sight of his partner, one of the pillars of his strength, reeling from Virgil's devastating blow. Grief and fury surged through him, grief for the damage done to Sarumo, fury and resentment at Virgil's overwhelming power. "I'm sorry, Sarutobi. This is all I can do." Sarumo's voice trembled on the wind, tinged with helplessness and regret, before dissolving into a wisp of smoke and vanishing altogether. It wasn't just a physical departure, but a blow to Hiruzen's very spirit. Anger flared in his chest, and his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Yet, beneath that fury burned an even fiercer determination. As Hokage, he vowed, voice low and steady, "I will defeat him." No room for doubt remained. Every choice Hiruzen made carried the safety of the entire village, and now was no time to falter. He reached up and tightened his forehead protector, the emblem of his office and the weight of his responsibilities, resolving to stand firm until the very end. Ethan's voice rang out across the battlefield, charged with the pride of those who came before him. The will of fire, handed down by the 1st, 2nd, and 4th Hokages, will not be extinguished here. Virgil shrugged, his tone ice-cold. "You still cling to those empty words?" Without a word, Ethan sprang into action. He wove a swift series of hand seals, channeling his chakra deep into the earth. The ground trembled and cracked beneath him as he shouted, "Earth release, compound dragon flame flow." In an instant, the solid ground turned into a roiling quagmire. From the mud erupted a titanic dragon formed of earth, its maw opening in a deafening roar as it lunged at Virgil like a battering ram. At the same time, Ethan inhaled sharply and unleashed a pillar of white-hot flame, hot enough to melt steel, directly above the mud dragon. The fiery inferno and the massive earthen beast converged. Earth and fire intertwined in a single, devastating assault that threatened to obliterate everything in its path. Virgil merely shook his head and lifted the Yama sword with effortless grace. In an instant, lightning-bright arcs of blade light rippled through the air, 9 of them, each one seeming to slice the very fabric of space itself. As those serrated gashes opened, the roaring torrent of earth dragon flame was torn apart, and the massive mud dragon collapsed like fragile parchment under the sword's edge. Its shattered pieces were sucked into the ruptured void and vanished without a trace. Watching this, Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes widened in astonishment, but his resolve only sharpened. He knew facing an opponent like Virgil left no room for half measures. With a blur, he invoked the body flicker technique and reappeared directly behind his foe. At the same moment, he exhaled a gale of razor-sharp wind. "Wind style, cyclone," he roared. The cyclone came with breathtaking speed and enough force to grind boulders to dust. Virgil, however, moved as if he could see the attack coming from behind. In one smooth motion, he sheathed and redrew the Yama sword, angling the blade just so. Rather than striking the wind vortex head-on, he slashed diagonally through the air, rending another crack in space itself. The wind-style cyclone that had seemed utterly unstoppable was swallowed by the spatial rift the moment it touched its edge, vanishing without so much as a whisper. Had Hiruzen Sarutobi not reacted in the nick of time, he would have been dragged in too. He dropped to one knee, his lungs burning with each ragged breath. A drop of cold sweat traced a line down his temple as he stared at Virgil, standing there, untouched and untroubled. Worthless, he muttered under his breath. Drawing such a massive ninjutsu had nearly drained him completely. Powerless frustration welled up inside him. There was simply no way to best an opponent like Virgil with ordinary means. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. I hate to do it, he admitted to himself, but I've no choice. With that, Hiruzen inhaled deeply and leapt into a flurry of hand seals. His chakra erupted like a roaring river, surging outward until it could no longer hold together, then split in four. In an instant, 4 perfect duplicates of Hiruzen Sarutobi sprang to life, each one his mirror image in strength, skill, and cunning. They burst into the air and dropped into position around Ethan, closing in on all sides. Ninjutsu, Great 5-Style Convergence, shouted Sarutobi Hiruzen in unison with his 4 shadow clones. Together they wove hand seals and unleashed 5 A-rank elemental jutsu: fire, earth, water, wind, and lightning. Instantly, flaming pillars roared skyward like dragons of fire. Jagged boulders crashed down in an earth-shattering landslide. Surging walls of water rose like tsunamis. Razor-sharp gusts of wind sliced through the air, and crackling bolts of lightning rumbled like thunder. The 5 elements twisted together into a kaleidoscopic net of destruction, converging on Ethan as if determined to tear him apart. Yet Ethan's face remained unnervingly calm. He stood motionless, the legendary Yama sword gently spinning in his hand. As the quintet of elements closed in, he lifted the blade in one fluid motion. At the very tip, the sword blazed with an almost blinding light, and in an instant it devoured every last thread of the converged jutsu. Boom! 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 The shockwaves rocked the battlefield, scattering dust and debris in every direction. When the dust finally settled, not a trace of the 5-style onslaught remained, swallowed whole by Ethan's blade. A deafening blast rocked the clearing, splitting the earth and sending a towering column of smoke and debris skyward. As the haze finally drifted away, Ethan remained standing, his robes unmarked, his gaze steady. Opposite him, the 4th Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, collapsed to his knees, utterly drained. He stared at the scorched crater before him, vision swimming. "Hokage-sama!" cried his attendants, rushing forward to steady him. Ethan took a single, unhurried breath and sheathed his Yama sword. He had demonstrated his power. There was no pleasure in slaughtering opponents who posed no real challenge. He only killed those who stood in his path, and at Hiruzen's own request, he had spared the venerable Hokage's life. "Is that enough?" Ethan asked, voice calm but edged with steel. "Or do you wish to continue?" Hiruzen shook his head, too spent even to speak. Seeing the 4th Hokage yield, Shimura Danzo opened his mouth, but Hiruzen leveled him with a glare sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare," the look warned, "or you'll answer to me." Danzo snapped shut his mouth and fell back into the ranks. Silence settled over the clearing save for Hiruzen's ragged breaths. Ethan's question still hung in the air, an offer of mercy wrapped in unspoken threat. And in that tense pause, the outcome of their encounter was clear. Konoha would concede, at least for now. It was a shame that Virgil hadn't been powerful enough to finish off Sarutobi Hiruzen. If he had, he'd be Hokage by now. After all, when the Hokage speaks, no one dares to disobey. Chapter 899, Uchiha Obito feels he's on the right track again. Ethan leaned forward, thoroughly absorbed as Virgil dispatched Hiruzen Sarutobi. It was a spectacular display. Virgil moved with precision, yet he refrained from delivering a killing blow. Likewise, Hyuga Hiyashi lay wounded but alive. Ethan wondered if Virgil's restraint was strategic. Perhaps he didn't want to jeopardize the intelligence he was here to gather. After the battle, Virgil invited Hiruzen to recount the history of the shinobi world. As the former Hokage spoke, Ethan watched the faint glow of Virgil's exploration progress bar tick upward. The increase was slow, but unmistakable. Virgil was probing in the right direction. What neither Virgil nor Ethan realized was that the bar tracked more than just lore and hidden secrets. It also responded to encounters with key figures, people whose influence shaped history itself. To push his progress further, Virgil would have to cross paths with Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, Black Zetsu, and even Otsutsuki Kaguya. For now, they were still at the outset of their investigation. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sensed that Virgil's real journey, the one that would unlock the deepest mysteries of their world, was only just beginning. Hiruzen Sarutobi couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was odd. He seemed utterly unfamiliar with the history of the shinobi world. Even after Hiruzen and the other elders patiently recounted the rise and fall of the 5 great hidden villages and the noble clans, Ethan simply stared at the flickering progress bar in his vision, which stubbornly read 20%. "What's going on?" Ethan finally asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "Surely there's more you haven't told me." Hiruzen exchanged glances with the other elders. "We've shared everything we know," one of them said quietly. They'd laid out the intricate lineages of the major families and recounted every key event in Konoha's history, yet Ethan's expression remained inscrutable. As he considered their words, the progress indicator refused to budge. After a moment, a new thought seemed to strike him. If Konoha alone couldn't push that number higher, perhaps he needed to visit all 5 villages. Without another word, Ethan turned and strode out of the great hall. The Konoha officials, who had been watching him warily since his arrival, tensed immediately. A small group of high-ranking shinobi began sealing hand signs, preparing a jutsu to contain him if necessary. But as Ethan reached the gates, the chakra threads of their seal unraveled harmlessly at his feet. He paused only long enough to meet Hiruzen's astonished gaze, then continued on his way. For a moment, the gathered elders simply stood there in silence. It was clear now that Konoha contained no more secrets for Ethan, and that his journey through the 5 great shinobi nations was just beginning. Chapter 10: Gathering Clouds. High above the hidden leaf, Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen convened an urgent meeting in the council chamber. Laid out before him and the elders, Danzo Shimura among them, were the scrolls detailing Virgil's abilities. They contained everything the village knew of the mysterious warrior who wielded a space-time slash capable of rending chakra and flesh with equal ease. "That slash isn't just a cutting jutsu," Danzo said, tracing a diagram with his finger. "It tears open rifts in space. We have no direct counter." Hiruzen leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Exactly. We must safeguard this intelligence. If Virgil ever learns how much we know, he'll change his approach, or attack the village directly." He tapped the table, where emblems of the old Whirlpool country's seals were illustrated in meticulous detail. "But we do have options. The sealing arts handed down from the Whirlpool legacy remain our greatest asset. With techniques like the Shiki Fujin or the Inner Four Symbol seal, a well-placed barrier could hold even an opponent like him." A hushed agreement passed around the table. The idea of using sealing jutsu, tools long regarded as the Weu, Ik's answer to overwhelming force, felt both logical and desperate. Orders were dispatched at once. Ambu Black Ops would refine these seals into offensive traps, and selected Jonin would drill genin squads in secret seal handling. Meanwhile, whispers of the mysterious strongman had already spread through Konoha's spy network. The reports reached Uchiha Obito in a matter of hours, and not long after, word slipped to Nagato and Konan of the Akatsuki. Late that night, in a hidden chamber draped in shadows, Obito waited in silence. A soft rustle heralded Black Zetsu's arrival. The sentient vine demon materialized beside him, placing a freshly copied intelligence scroll on the obsidian table. Obito's crimson Sharingan flared as he unfurled the parchment. "What have you learned?" Black Zetsu inclined his head. "This information is most crucial, Master Obito. Virgil's abilities and our opportunity are laid bare." Obito's lips curved into a measured smile. "Then we must prepare. The game has only just begun." Ethan's exploits had already become the stuff of legend. Not only had he defeated the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, renowned far and wide as the professor of ninjutsu, but he also delivered a crippling blow to Hyuga Hiyashi, the patriarch of the Hyuga clan. All of this was accomplished while under simultaneous assault by Konoha's most elite shinobi, including the foremost warriors of the Pig, Deer, and Cho families. Such a feat was virtually unprecedented in the entire history of the ninja world. Uchiha Obito studied the sketch before him, an image of Ethan reconstructed from the memories of Konoha's villagers and faithfully copied by Black Zetsu. He frowned. "There's something off about him," Obito murmured. "He doesn't even look like a ninja." As Obito spoke, Black Zetsu's thoughts churned in silent urgency. After centuries of wandering the shinobi realms and uncovering every hidden truth, he still knew nothing of Ethan's origins. The man's very appearance clashed with everything Zetsu understood about ninja culture, and his naive questions about the world of shinobi only deepened the mystery. Could he be an assassin dispatched by his mother's clan to end Zetsu's schemes? The possibility sent a rare tremor of unease through Black Zetsu's ancient being. Who, or what, was Ethan? Truly, Virgil's name had begun circulating through the ninja world, whispers linking him, without any proof, to the Otsutsuki clan. Black Zetsu, however, wasn't willing to overlook the slightest risk. He needed to know exactly what Virgil was capable of, so he decided to send one of his most powerful agents, Uchiha Obito, to test him firsthand. When Obito learned of Virgil's rumored strength, his curiosity was immediately piqued. Black Zetsu inwardly nodded with satisfaction. Once Obito took the bait, the rest of the plan would fall neatly into place. Before Obito departed, Black Zetsu offered one last caution. "Obito, I must remind you that Virgil seems to have an unusual resistance to space-time ninjutsu. Even your Kamui might fail against him." Obito let out a cold, amused chuckle. "Resistance? My Kamui is absolute. No one can slip through its void that easily." He had survived the Flying Thunder God technique before. He trusted in his own mastery of space-time ninjutsu. Black Zetsu allowed himself a small, confident smile. He knew Obito's nature well. Once the Uchiha set his pride on a path, nothing would stop him from seeing it through. Uchiha Obito moved like a shadow, appearing out of nowhere in front of Virgil. "You're using space-time ninjutsu," Virgil said coolly, his gaze fixed on Obito. Obito offered a single, confident nod. "So you recognize me?" Virgil's eyes flicked to the translucent progress bar, hovering in midair. It had just ticked up 5%. A realization dawned on him. "You're the one who wreaked havoc in Konohagakure, aren't you?" Obito's smirk deepened. "Answers first. Who are you?" Virgil tilted his head, studying Obito with faint amusement. "I am Uchiha Madara." Obito raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Madara, huh? Very well. Tell me everything you know about this world, and I might let you live." "I like your confidence," Virgil replied with a sardonic smile. That was enough to set Obito off. In the blink of an eye, he activated his body flicker technique and closed the distance between them. His lone Sharingan ignited, distorting time and space around his outstretched hand. A faint, spiraling vortex formed in his palm, the gateway to his personal dimension. Once Virgil stepped through, even Obito had to admit, escape would be impossible, and the only other outcome was a slow, inevitable starvation. "I'd be happy to help, but I'll need the full chapter text you'd like revised. Please paste the entire excerpt, and I'll turn it into a polished, natural-sounding English version with the protagonist renamed Ethan." Chapter 900, Severance. Ethan drew the Yama blade with deliberate slowness. The sword's flash seemed to freeze time itself, suffusing the air with awe and solemnity. This divine weapon, capable of slicing through space and severing all bonds, felt almost alive in his hand, every sweep of the blade rebending and rebirthing reality around it. At the sight of the blade's emergence, Uchiha Obito vanished into his Kamui dimension, his body reduced to a mere projection of warped space and, in theory, untouchable. But Ethan was no stranger to spatial tricks. A practiced space shifter himself, he recognized the tactic at once. A contemptuous sneer curved his lips, part scorn for his opponent's ploy, part absolute faith in his own power. The Yama blade quivered as if the universe itself were making way for its edge. The moment the sword met air, space began to twist and tear, opening a narrow rift that led straight into the mysterious divine realm. In an instant, every visible and invisible boundary was cut away by that single, unerring stroke. This time, the Yama sword wasn't aimed at a mere tear in space. It homed directly in on Uchiha Obito's ghostly form. Under Virgil's command, the blade transformed into a pure shaft of light, ignoring every law of divine space as it sliced straight through Obito's protective realm. With a sharp crack that sounded like reality itself straining, Obito's once invincible godly space shattered as though made of glass. The fracture widened in an instant, yawning open like a colossal maw that swallowed him whole. But even that wasn't the end of it. The radiant blade plunged deeper, bisecting Obito's body in midair. Above and below, his form hung separated, tendrils of blood and warped space swirling together in a horrifying tableau. How can this be? Obito gasped, disbelief and despair echoing in his voice. His eyes, wide with shock and unwillingness, stared at the impossible devastation. He'd never imagined his divine sanctuary could fall so easily, or that his fate would end so abruptly. Virgil sheathed his sword slowly, his face blank as though their recent clash had been no more than a routine skirmish. In truth, Obito, the lightning-quick, space-bending swordsman known as Dimension Slash, had been courting death the moment he stepped before Virgil. If Virgil hadn't needed to harvest exploration data from him, the Uchiha would already be reduced to fragments, their pieces scattered and ground to dust across the shattered rifts of space. Obito crumpled to the ground, his lower half still trapped in the collapsing Kamui dimension. Virgil's brutal rupture of the pocket space had torn into Obito's Kamui Sharingan as well. Blood trickled from his eyes, and for a terrifying instant, he feared he'd gone blind. How is this possible? He thought, panic shrinking his pupils as he searched for any sign of explanation. But there was none. His Kamui, once the ultimate trump card that let him dominate the shinobi world, had become his greatest weakness. A roar of anger and fear surged up from within him as the Hashirama cells in his body awakened, flooding his veins with the raw power of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. They were like a fountain of life, continuously knitting Ethan's shattered flesh back together after the brutal toll exacted by his overuse of Kamui. Yet no matter how miraculous that restorative power was, it couldn't instantly return him to full strength or explain the impossible scene unfolding before him. His eyes locked onto the figure standing no more than a few meters away, the enemy known as Virgil. In Virgil's hand gleamed a seemingly ordinary longsword, its silver edge wreathed in an otherworldly chill. That sword had sliced straight through Ethan's body the moment he tried to slip into another dimension, cleaving him in two as if space itself obeyed its blade. Damn, this can't be real. Ethan's voice was a ragged whisper. Shock and indignation roiled inside him like a storm. He'd spent years perfecting his space-time ninjutsu, Kamui, to the very pinnacle of the ninja arts. Even if Uchiha Madara still walked the world, Ethan felt certain he would fall short of this skill. Yet here he was, laid low in an instant, his confidence shattered like glass. He remembered countless battles where Kamui had been his trump card. No matter the foe's might, once he slipped through dimensions, he was untouchable, able to dodge any attack or strike from the shadows. But now, as he struggled to draw breath, reality weighed upon him like a tidal wave of cold despair. His greatest power had failed him when he needed it most. But today, everything shattered like a soap bubble. The space-time ninjutsu Ethan had once wielded with absolute confidence was being undone right before his eyes by an opponent called Virgil, using methods he couldn't even fathom. An unprecedented sense of dread surged through Ethan's heart. He knew, in that moment, that he might have finally met the greatest enemy he would ever face. Who are you? How can you break my Kamui? Ethan roared, his voice raw with disbelief. He poured chakra into his left eye again, desperate to open the Kamui gate and drag Virgil into its accursed void. But no matter how hard he tried, the ocular jutsu refused to respond. The swirling darkness that should have formed instantly and irreversibly remained stubbornly closed. Far off on the battlefield, Black Zetsu and White Zetsu noticed the anomaly without delay. Black Zetsu's face went deathly pale. He knew better than anyone how invincible Ethan's space-time techniques were, and he understood all too well the implications of their failure now. "What's happening?" Black Zetsu hissed, fury and fear warring in his tone. "Why didn't he just absorb Virgil? Instead, he's been sliced in half." White Zetsu stared, speechless. In his entire life, he'd never seen Kamui, Ethan's greatest trump card, broken. An impossible thought flickered through his mind. Could there really be someone stronger than our Uchiha? Is there really a force in this world that can suppress space-time ninjutsu? Black Zetsu muttered, his brow creased in thought. Who is this Virgil? He wondered. The man had managed to do what even Kaguya Otsutsuki, my own mother, could not: halt the activation of space-time ninjutsu. Black Zetsu's curiosity flared. After a moment's silence, he spoke. The essence of space-time ninjutsu lies in bending and rupturing the fabric of space. Obito's Kamui exemplifies this, creating a separate dimension that he, or any object he chooses, can slip into, rendering him untouchable. But the world is a tapestry of interconnected laws. Perhaps there truly is a power out there capable of seeing through and counteracting those distortions. He paused, as if tasting the words. Yet even my mother never spoke of such a power. In that admission lay a tangled web of emotions, the fear of the unknown, and the intoxicating allure of the strength it might bring. Chapter 901, the 900th chapter, Give Me a Reward. Black Zetsu's voice was low and grave. If Virgil truly masters this power, it will shake the entire shinobi world to its core. Baizeze leaned forward, anxiety etched on his face as he watched Obito's form falter. Black Zetsu, he asked hesitantly, shouldn't we intervene? Obito, he didn't finish before Haijue cut in. Hold on. Black Zetsu's gaze remained fixed on the battlefield. Obito still has a trump card. If we rush in now, we might ruin whatever plan he has. Besides, I'm curious, what kind of ability does Virgil possess that can leave Obito so helpless? On the field, Obito's heart churned with panic. Over and over he reached for his divine power, and each attempt sank like a stone, unresponsive. He thought back to his days of dominance, when no foe, no matter how fearsome or cunning, could withstand his will. Time and again, he'd turned the tide of battle at a moment's notice. Now that power felt like a fading memory. Why? Why won't it work? He screamed silently. His eyes burned red with furious confusion, unwilling to accept that his strength might truly be slipping away. Ethan stood amidst the shattered remains of the battlefield, his chest tightening with a familiar ache. He remembered all too well the day he dueled the fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato. He hadn't lacked power. He'd simply underestimated the speed and precision of the Flying Thunder God technique. Even then, at least he had been granted the chance to call upon his divine abilities. Today, facing Virgil's overwhelming strength, he'd never even seen an opening. Frustration gnawed at him, morphing quickly into a cold, sinking despair. He thought back over every moment since he first awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Those electrifying clashes, the razor-edge standoffs between life and death. Each victory had felt absolute, each tribute to his prowess an indelible testament to his destiny. Yet now, those memories seemed as intangible as a moon's reflection on a rippling pond. How long has it been since I felt this kind of panic? Ethan asked himself, voice barely more than a whisper. The Hollow's divine power had always been his shield. So long as he willed only to defend himself and withdraw, no opponent in the shinobi world could bring him low. He had carried that confidence like armor, certain it would never fail. But confidence, he realized with a start, had its limits. Standing against Virgil's relentless onslaught, he felt that once unshakable conviction crumble away. His power, which had once made him feel invincible, now felt woefully insufficient. For the first time, Ethan understood the true meaning of helplessness, and as the dust settled around him, he braced himself for whatever came next, determined to reclaim the strength he had so nearly lost. Ethan suddenly realized how vulnerable his once invincible power was against Virgil. Even if Uchiha Madara himself were resurrected, there would be no escape this time. A furious, helpless fury welled up in Ethan's chest. He wouldn't accept defeat, yet no amount of rage or protest could alter the reality before him. As if drawn into the surrounding magma, his form blurred at the edges, and the very air around him shimmered with the heat of his wrath. This was more than simple anger. It was the culmination of years spent battling fate's cruelties, the searing pain of losing someone dear, and an unquenchable thirst for absolute power. The blood of the Uchiha clan roared through his veins. His Sharingan flared to life, awakened by the intensity of his emotions, and propelled him into an entirely new realm of strength. Concentrating every ounce of his will, Ethan felt an unprecedented energy surge within him, the crystallized essence of his darkest ambitions. Slowly, the legendary Susanoo, an avatar of godlike power, began to take shape around him. Ethereal armor wove itself into existence, drawn forth by the sheer force of his determination. In that moment, Ethan stood at the threshold of a power he had only ever dreamed, of wielding. Unlike ordinary Mangekyo Sharingan wielders, every time Ethan summoned his Susanoo, he risked drawing on his own life force. Thanks to the blessing of Hashirama's cells, however, that burden had been greatly reduced, allowing him to wield this power with far greater ease. "Susanoo," he intoned, and in the empty air, a massive blue skeleton began to form. Bone and armor materialized out of nothing, coalescing into a towering warrior whose very presence radiated a frigid, solemn aura, as if an ancient god of war had descended from another plane. Ethan's eyes burned with determination. He meant to crush the enemy who dared challenge his authority. "You may try to withstand my divine might," he declared, his voice cold and unyielding. There was no room for mercy now, only the fierce will to win and the murderous intent he felt toward Virgil, a formidable foe whose existence threatened everything Ethan had worked to build. In Ethan's mind, someone as dangerous as Virgil had no place in this world. On the sidelines, White Zetsu and Black Zetsu watched in silent fascination. Their whispered conversation revealed both their respect for Ethan's power and their eager anticipation of how this titanic clash would conclude. Baizezi's voice held a note of surprise. "It seems Obito has never deployed this ability in battle before." Black Jue studied the scene coolly. Naturally, when past foes fell easily to his divine power, there was no need for such an overwhelming technique. But this adversary is a different story. Obito's colossal Susanoo, a skeletal titan of blue flame that seemed to consume everything in its path, loomed over them, yet Virgil showed no sign of fear. He lifted his head deliberately, and for a heartbeat, time itself felt suspended, as if the very air crackled with tension. Then, with a thunderous motion, Obito slammed the Susanoo's massive arm downward. In Virgil's grasp shone the Yama sword, an ancient blade said to sever cause and effect, to slice through the fabric of space and time. Channeling every ounce of his power and speed into a single strike, Virgil moved in a heartbeat. The sword leapt from its sheath in a flash, its arc so swift it cleaved the air itself. Even the seemingly indestructible blue bones of the Susanoo cracked under the terrifying force of his rending slash. With a deafening roar, Susanoo's defense shattered in an instant. Its colossal azure palm split cleanly down the middle as blue light erupted in every direction. A horrifying wave of spatial pressure pulsed outward from Ethan like a shockwave tearing at reality itself. The earth quaked and groaned, buckling beneath the force, while gale-whistling winds hurled sand and rock into the air. In moments, the entire battlefield was swallowed by chaos. Yet at the eye of the storm, Ethan stood unmoved, as solid and unyielding as bedrock. Under the power of his abyssal Tao of demonic space, the mighty skeletal form of Susanoo cracked and crumbled like delicate porcelain. Shards of ethereal bone streaked across the sky, each fragment humming with enough lethal energy to annihilate any ordinary ninja. Obito Uchiha's heart pounded with a new, chilling fear. The legendary might he had once revered now felt so inconsequential beside Ethan's inexorable power. Chapter 902, Virgil uncovers the mastermind. "Baize, we don't have much time. We have to move now," Black Zetsu urged, his voice low but urgent. White Zetsu nodded beside him. Uchiha Obito, now locked in battle with Virgil, was clearly outmatched. If he fell here, the entire Eye of the Moon project would collapse. Black Zetsu knew Obito's value too well. He was the linchpin of Madara's grand design. Baize, normally light-hearted and fond of teasing, stifled his usual grin. For once, he looked grim. "This plan is incredibly risky," he admitted. "If we fail, all of us will be lost." "There can be no hesitation," Black Zetsu replied, his tone brooking no argument. "For the future of the Uchiha clan and for Madara-sama's legacy, we must throw caution to the wind." At his command, the earth around them trembled. From the ground rose dozens of figures, each a perfect replica of Obito. Though their forms varied slightly, every one radiated the same chakra signature and bore the same features of the fallen Uchiha. White Zetsu's ultimate trick, countless Obitos, ready to turn the tide of this desperate gamble. These illusions swept over the battlefield like a tidal wave, driving the chaos to an even more unpredictable extreme. At its center stood Virgil, motionless and untroubled, his gaze cold as ice. The Yama sword in his hand emitted a faint blue glow. With every swing, space itself seemed to shatter, as if even time quivered beneath the blade. "Humph," Virgil snorted. "You think cheap tricks can distract me?" He let out a curt laugh, and the Yama demon sword traced brilliant arcs through the air. Every strike carved reality apart, and each illusory Obito dissolved into nothingness, vanishing as though he'd never existed. Yet amid the wreckage of shattered space, the true Obito slipped away under the cover of confusion. His Mangekyo Sharingan pulsed, desperately searching for an opening. Sweat ran in rivulets down his temple, dripping onto the blood-soaked earth below, each drop a silent pledge to survive. "I can't die here," he vowed inwardly, heart pounding as he prepared to make his move. Ethan's strides grew ever more urgent, each ragged breath fueling a surge of determination through his veins. He couldn't afford to falter, not with unfinished missions waiting and comrades depending on him. Then, without warning, an intense pulse of chakra tore up from the earth and wrapped around him like a living cloak. "Black Zetsu, White Zetsu," he whispered, relief warming his chest. Their combined power tugged at him, ripping open the fabric of space and time. The world around him dissolved into a whirl of light and shadow, until, with a soft crack, he landed on cold stone. He blinked through the gloom of a hidden cavern, its ceiling fractured by faint cracks that let in only ghostly slivers of daylight. Dampness coated the air, heavy with the scent of mildew and wet earth. Yet for the first time since his ordeal began, Ethan felt safe. This was the Akatsuki's refuge in the Rain Country, a secret sanctuary where he could regroup. He straightened, summoning his remaining strength, then turned to the two shadowy figures at his side. "We'll recover here, as fast as we can," he said, voice steady despite the exhaustion lining his words. "Then we'll strike back. We have a plan to see through, and people to protect." White Zetsu nodded in agreement, while Black Zetsu remained silent, inscrutable thoughts flickering behind his dark eyes. A short distance away, in the hidden depths of the Rain Country, the Akatsuki's secret base stirred with activity. Rain tumbled relentlessly against the walls, as though weeping for the upheaval that had just occurred. Inside a simple tent, Obito sat alone, absently rolling a finely honed kunai between his fingers, a battle companion and a symbol of his unshakable resolve. "He's mastered time-space ninjutsu, and his strength is beyond anything we've ever encountered," Obito said gravely, frowning at the weapon in his hand. "His arrival has upended every one of our schemes, and now he threatens our core objectives." White Zetsu exhaled, sounding almost regretful. "And his space-time techniques seem to nullify your divine power. That poses a very serious problem." Obito's gaze shifted to Black Zetsu, where complex emotions glimmered in his eyes. "Black Zetsu, you're the strategist at the heart of this organization. You know all the hidden truths of the shinobi world. Tell me, what are we facing, and how do we overcome it?" "Do you really know nothing about Ethan?" Obito asked, narrowing his eyes. Heijue shook his head, his expression calm and cold. "I wasn't even aware he existed, and I certainly never imagined he'd become a threat. That only makes him more dangerous. But everything and everyone has a weakness. If we discover his, we can bring him down." Obito's gaze brightened for an instant, then clouded again. "But we don't even know his true identity. How do we begin to expose any flaw?" A faint, mysterious smile played at the corners of Haijue's lips. "That's why we set a trap. He's so adept at space-time ninjutsu, we'll turn it against him. We'll lay bait he can't resist, then spring the snare. At the same time, we'll call in the Akatsuki, have Nagato and the others move. Our aim is world peace, and any obstacle must be removed." Obito paused, considering the plan, then nodded. "Very well. But we must proceed in the shadows. Ethan must never suspect our hand in this." Virgil stood nearby, silent and watchful, as the two conspirators finalized their plot. Black Zetsu and White Zetsu would never have suspected Ethan was on their trail. Once he locks onto your chakra, especially after memorizing Uchiha Obito's unique signature, escaping him is nearly impossible. He can slice through space itself, homing in on his target with surgical precision. Ethan lets a small, intrigued smile crease his lips. Interesting. He could have erased every single Zetsu clone with one effortless swing of his blade, but his mission readout had just spiked again, the indicator jumping wildly. Clearly, those two strange figures were more than mere distractions. In a heartbeat, he stilled his hand and decided to follow them instead. He needed to know where they came from and what they intended. Like a silent shadow, Ethan tailed them through the thicket until he caught snippets of their whispered plans. Far from intimidated, he resolved to pursue them all the way to the land of rain. He was curious to discover on what grounds they believed they could stand against him. He recalled Obito's warning. The ceaseless downpour here is sustained by the Rain Tiger release technique, a jutsu that betrays any intruder through its lingering chakra. But Obito himself is now too weakened to maintain or suppress it. No matter. Ethan was already committed. He would see this through to the end, and nothing would stop him. Ethan's lower body remained trapped in the Kamui space. Since he couldn't reopen the portal yet, he had no choice but to use White Zetsu as a makeshift pair of legs.